You go?
Yeah.
Good evening. It is about 6:05, June 18th, 2024. Welcome to this session of the fourth Cascade Locks. We'll start with the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
President Moran,
Here.
Vice President Clute, here. Commissioner Nance,
Here.
Commissioner Tweet, Commissioner Peterson,
Here.
and Commissioner Tweet is absent. Or excused.
All right, modifications, additions, and changes to the agenda, please.
Agenda item 7, the executive session. We're gonna strike that tonight. I did not get the information back that I needed to provide to you guys. I will likely get it back tomorrow, and we'll see it on the next agenda. I'd also like us to have a little bit of flexibility for Mark Knudsen, which is 5C. He's gonna be joining later this sometime today. He couldn't make it right at the start of the meeting. So I'd like to work him in and allow him to skedaddle as well. So Carrie Ann will keep an eye on that, and we'll let you know.
Perfect. Public comment. Good. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Denise Lynn Baker, and I'm speaking on behalf of Main Street Cascade Locks, a nonprofit organization. Although I wear many hats, including professor and a city councilor, I am not speaking for all other hats, just as a Main Street volunteer. And I want to give you an update. Our organization is meeting the goals of Oregon Main Street. We are affiliated now. I don't know, I shared that when I was with the port before. Affiliated status means we moved up from connected communities, which was part of the city last year, which means we are fully vetted for any grants and technical support from Oregon Main Street. We have, thankfully, to one of our, I'm the president, to our vice president, we have already filed for nonprofit status. We have a Facebook page, we have website. We're doing our first all community meeting next Tuesday, and you're all invited. I'll give you these, take one and pass it around at Gorgeous Brewery from 5 to 8 p.m. It is also a fundraiser to help pay for our setup costs for nonprofit fees, and as we've taken a small loan from one of our officers to do so. So if you can come, that'd be great. We already have some great raffle prizes, baskets, and of course, we take any more things that folks want to send in. We will be sending out letters to those business and landowners that we don't have emails for this week, inviting them as well. And I wanted to let you know that as we learn more about Main Street, our goal is, according to the affiliated status, to be set up with a part-time paid consultant by 2027. So we are, according to the folks, Sherry and Cam at Oregon Main Street, we're doing well, even though we feel like, we're just getting started. And by saying that, I want you to know that if you're not familiar with Oregon Main Street, please Google Oregon Main Street and have a look. Please come next Tuesday, I'll share a video, and please email on this invitation is Main Street Cascade Locks, and I'll share you lots of things, share with you. I get at least twice a month update about grants, about training opportunities, and I share them sometimes with Genevieve, Jeremiah, and sometimes with your president if they seem appropriate. Cities across Oregon, and this is part of National Main Street, which has been around since 1972. It's well research validated that their style, their program, their guidance works, and that's why they say we have 3 years that a paid executive director is important. I've spoken with Kelly across the river at Stevenson Main Street quite a bit, even today when I went to see the music, because they did the streetery and they are doing live music there. You're any kind of exciting thing in Main Street, first up, Main Street Stevenson is their Main Street program. And they're well affiliated with their port and their city, and we're hoping to develop that relationship, and we'll let you know more as we make that ask. one exciting thing, we have a core group of members that have been developing our goals for this year. And it's well aligned with the Downtown Revitalization Committee. I don't know if you're familiar with that. That's a city project where Amanda Ferguson from the University of Oregon Planning is helping us to rewrite our codes, and ODOT is showing up as well. And so our Main Street core officers and members are saying, let's align our downtown design code with that, our goals, because that's Main Street has 4 pillars: sustainability, economic vitality of the organization and the town, design of the downtown, what do we want to look like, and promotions of the businesses. Now, what's exciting is, your economic development all over Cascade Locks. The city is all over. Main Street is Wanapa from the bridge to Oregon. Main Street had us ended at Forest Lane, basically, the little coffee carts, and I think we've included scenic winds. So one exciting thing that we hope we don't miss, and we may be looking to the port for a partner, we'll let you know, is that every 2 years, there's an Oregon Revitalization Building Grant. The last time, that's coming up in January 2025 to apply. The last time it was $200,000, up to, could be divided. This time the state gave more money because they see the value of Main Street up to $500,000. And Oregon Main Street is part of the Oregon Park and Rec Historical Heritage Program, so they're very much into heritage. And so our team is discussing what goals might fit that, what buildings. We haven't decided how we're going to approach that. So it would be, in order to get this grant, Main Street would be applying. No building owner, but it goes toward the building, right? So we have lots of ideas, and again, our core group, I think, wisely has decided, let's see what this Downtown Development Revitalization Code Committee comes up with, because they're going to survey the community again. And it's great that you've done a strategic plan, that the city has recently done a strategic plan, so we have that data. And what's exciting about this downtown plan and Main Street, we have at least 3 of our members on that committee as well, is that Amanda Ferguson worked with us with the city before on the strategic plan, so she's getting to know us, and she's actually coming up for a walk through this week to look at buildings. So I'm inviting any of you to reach out to Main Street Cascade Locks at gmail.com, and if you have questions or to share anything that you're saying, Denise, this would be really cool. I've met with McKed as well in the head of Main Street, and they are excited. And they're like, we can help with grants, we can help. And so I know there's a lot of organizations, and even talking to tourism about our place related to what they do on Main Street. So other cities do it. Nobody's trying to step on anybody's toes, but we want to. The exciting thing about Main Street is it's non-governmental. It's a nonprofit organization. And that means we can apply for grants that the governments can't. That means we can do some things that governments can't. So that's kind of exciting. And I meet, they have every Thursday morning, mornings on Main, where we talk with Main Street executive directors across Oregon, get fabulous ideas and see the fabulous things that other places are doing and help each other and document stuff. Just want to give you an update. Welcome you to reach out to any of our board members or any of us for questions. Come have fun on Tuesday and support our program. And any questions now? I know it's short.
You were very thorough.
Okay, and thank you. Sometime I might ask to get on the agenda, but I really want, I hope you'll come on Tuesday. Thank you. And I would say, Carrie Ann, I'll probably take this guy with me and then log in Zoom if you'll look at me. Okay. Thanks, Denise.
We have Cesar Estrada, who I've had a few phone conversations with, and he hopes to get a proposal on the agenda sometime soon in the future, but he's visiting us from the LA area, so please come take your time.
Hello everyone, my name is Cesar, I'm veteran. And something that I wanna pursue again because I'm really bored. In my couch sleeping chance. But anyway, I probably live longer or be staying active like putting up some successful projects in Los Angeles. For example, we have we are capital movie capital of the world. Los Angeles have all the studios, you name it, Netflix, Google, Amazon, everyone is come to LA first or New York or Oregon or Portland. So I wanna, since I think it's easier to do this movie project first as a fundraising effort, because we know that we are helping the trail systems. You have two or more trails all cross right here in Cascade Flats. So the sources that we're targeting is first the movie industry right now, and I want to let you know that there's also a U.S. Department of Energy project that's going on, or further back is we are on like the middle stages already. Grants are given out for 200 million last year. This year, if we apply for this, we might lucky and we own the grants more than half chances. So there is a third portion that fundraising. We are deeply involved with this that I don't want stress to talk about, but I may say our social funding is not limited to make a good revitalization for your community here in Cascade Lakes Flats. It's not a promise, but if I do best on this, probably a big change can affect not just Cascade Lakes, but all over Oregon, east and south, I mean, western, east, north and south, and could be Washington State, because we're working with I came from Washington State before I came here, but it's the Discovery Trails, I working with the tribal heads in North Washington, so there's some not just properties over there, it's potential to cultivate or to wines, wine is lavender or agriculture mix up with a fundraising, with a good fundraising effort they do in LA. Have you heard the Makrila Pechanga Valley? That was a very successful, very active group of fundraisers in their town or in their city, very close to LA, next province, I mean next not even state, but it's California. So we are majorly targeting going back to the studios. I have that's why I mentioned that this project would be more easier to click or to we have good connections with the studios already. And the US Department of Energy project could follow the momentum of this, because we'll be success. If we're successful, the success of LA, the body for the fundraising or for the trails. I think let me tell you about the fat part of the Napa Valley concept that we're trying to do. We try to mix the elders also, the tribal leaders at Napa Valley, so that and that combines with the trail administrators, trail Department of California Transportation, they're all involved in this. But we need to go start from the bottom. So we're climbing up the ladder right now to invite all public involved in this project that have, now, let me, my time has might be short, I have only, let me tell you about the movie making, project. Currently, now we're creating this, short reel that we can show to producer that, we really want to involve in this from Napa Valley, to, Washington, Wisconsin Trails to Columbia River Gorge. And that way, we can show it to actually middle or complete the real project. We can show it to example is Britney Spears. When was the last major movie about Napa Valley about whites? That could be the Battle Shacks, right? Or in Santa Barbara counties, the sideways. And after that, it's getting less and less, or some major companies from Netflix, but they really made a dollar in any. But so we try to have the major successful artists like Taylor Swift or some other thousands of actors like that behind her that they can produce or star in this movie. Not necessarily they are the get the starring role. They can be Camille's cameo later on, but they can produce the movie for their own title and for their own benefits.
Good time to.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you
very much.
so much for your time. I got one story, but I'll tell you.
Policy Caesar will work on a proposal and get in front of the commission. Let's get a proposal together. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, consent agenda. Approval of minutes for commission meeting for, from May 21st, 2024 and June 3rd, 2024, as well as special commission meeting on May 30th, 2024. Ratification bill in the amount of $587,313.90. Approval of payroll for June 4th, 2024 in the amount of $41,449.47. Thank you.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as stated in its entirety.
All right.
I'll second that motion.
Motion and second has been made to approve the consent agenda as stated. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Adoption, business action items, adoption of 2024 to 2029 Port of Cascade Lock Strategic Business Plan.
Hello.
Hi there.
Guess I'm gonna have to go on the screen. The Moss Adams consulting team has now received all commissioner feedback as well as the Oregon Business Development Department's evaluation of the community survey results. OBD had no notes on the draft, and the community survey results were resoundingly positive. Moss Adams Strategy and Operations Senior and Bagley is going to present the review community survey results with the commission. Port of Cascade Strategic Business Plan was developed through a collaboration process involving port leadership, staff, Cascade Lots residents, and other businesses and public stakeholders, and is now ready for adoption.
Excellent. Serious discussion about this or there's presentation or anything?
I think Annie's going to make the presentation and walk us through community response.
Yep, I do have a presentation and I think maybe I can't take over sharing. So I need someone to stop sharing before I can share it. Perfect. Let me pull this up. Oh, it looks like the host has disabled participant screen sharing, but Carrie Ann, I actually sent you the presentation just a few minutes ago if you want to share it. Or you can enable me to share.
You should be able to hear now, I'm sorry.
Let me try again. Oh, yep. Perfect. How does that look?
Pretty good.
Good. Okay, great. Well, good to semi see you all again through this screen. If we haven't had the chance to meet, I'm Annie Fadley. I'm a consultant at Moss Adams, and my colleague Jessie Lenhart is also joining us on the line. And we've been working with the port on the strategic plan. And we're here tonight to give the final update on that process, which is really exciting. So just as a little reminder, the strategic business plan is really the blueprint for the Port of Cascade Locks that's going to guide the next 5 years of work. And tonight we're gonna just really quickly look at the stages that we've been through to reach this point in the process. And then I'll bring you through the results of the community survey that we ran, and then we'll touch on the major pieces that are in the plan, and then I will turn it back over to you for adoption. So this has been about a 6-month process. It's involved input from all sides. We have held several working commission retreats with this group. We conducted management, staff, and stakeholder interviews, and we went through several rounds of iteration on the draft plan. And tonight we are in the final stages in the bottom right corner here with the commissioner meeting and approval of plan. And since we last saw you, we ran a community survey showing the draft plan to the community and really just asking, what do you think? What's your reaction? What's your happiness with the plan? So I'm going to take you through what we heard. We had a really solid number of responses for this type of survey. So there were 23 respondents, the majority of whom were residents of Cascade Locks, and a good spread that you can see in this chart here in terms of how long survey respondents have lived in Cascade Locks. And about 40% of respondents also worked at or owned a business in Cascade Locks. And we, like I said, just put the plan to folks, said, let us know how you feel about each of the major pieces. And we got really positive feedback across the board. So the majority of people are on board with the plan, thumbs up, eager to see it implemented. And you can see here, specifically for the mission and vision statements, we have a really high rate of people responding that they feel extremely positively about the mission and vision statements in particular. And the same for the port's new value statements. The majority of respondents feel like those statements are a really good representation for the work of the port. And surprise, same for the goals and direction. So respondents are heavily in favor of the goals and direction of the port as well. And then we also asked the community to rank the 4 goals that are in the plan, really to just get a sense of what the port might want to prioritize in the first year. And we have a 3-way tie here between land management, recreation and tourism, and internal operations. So this is, I think, good news. It really just means that your major goal areas are resonating really well with the community, and you really have support for anything that you choose to prioritize in the first year of implementing the plan, which is really great. And overall, we just got really good feedback from the community. There were some helpful comments that were submitted that aren't captured here that helped really tweak that community description portion of Cascade Locks to make sure that it felt accurate. And we clarified some naming conventions throughout, but overall, there really weren't any major changes since the last time that you saw the plan as a result of the community feedback. So big check there. And then this is my very technical slide. We also submitted the plan to Business Oregon for review per their procedures for port strategic business plans. And they said, thumbs up, no notes. This looks exactly like I would expect to see for the Port of Cascade Locks. So they were happy with it and no changes from this process either. So what's in the plan? Like I said, no major changes since the last time it came across your desks and since it was put to the community for a review. So I'm just going to keep it short and sweet tonight since you're going to recognize all of these pieces. But this is the first page of the plan and the what is this called? the list of things that's in it. So we
The
have
table of contents.
a table of contents. This is why I bring Jess in places. Thank you. I'm like, the table of contents. So we have an introduction that discusses the port's history and mission. We have a little bit about the geography of the area, the reasons the community is drawn to Cascade Locks, and then the operations of the port itself internally. And then we touch on the strategic planning process that we went through. We state the strategic plan framework, so that's the mission, vision, values that you all came up with. And then we go into detailing the port's goals, objectives, activities in each of the 4 goal areas. And then we have some appendices that really go into that SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats that are facing the port, how the plan fits in with this with statewide policies, and then the economic and demographic profile of the region, and a list of additional port facilities, port property, and port plans. So the vision that is in the plan, the final version of the vision, as a reminder, the vision is what you see as the ideal state of the community in the future. And you all put this together as a result of several planning workshops. So our vision is that the port will serve as a dynamic hub for economic development, blending commerce and recreation to enhance the livability of our community. With the port's support, Cascade Locks will be known as a vibrant, business-friendly, and environmentally sustainable city that offers an exceptional quality of life for current and future generations. And mission, which is the plan for how you're going to achieve your vision. So through partnerships, care for our community, and preservation of the Bridge of the Gods, the port is an engine for economic growth, recreation, and tourism within the Columbia River Gorge. And finally, the values, and these are the principles by which you will strive to work. So as port professionals, we are collaborative, accountable, adaptable, considerate, and effective. And then the plan goes into the strategic goals that you landed on, which are organized into these 4 areas. So these goal areas are really just the priority areas for the port over the duration of the plan. So that's maintaining port assets, facilitate economic development through strategic management of port-owned buildings and land, encourage economic development by supporting recreation and tourism, and strengthen and modernize internal operations. Oh, that's fast. Let me say something else here. So this is guiding you for the next 5 years, and I'll give you a chance to sort of read through the sub lines here. And then in the plan, obviously, we have all of your activities organized into each of these goal areas. So you can really see everything that you're doing on a daily, monthly, yearly basis to really filter up into achieving these goals. And that's all that I have for you tonight. If there are any questions, we can discuss them now.
You did a very good job.
Yeah.
You did a great job.
Did we get comments on what people didn't like about them?
Yeah.
Like the one negative person?
The negative,
We got, I believe that we got comments, and we did get comments, but I don't know that we have access to those, right? I mean, we have access to them clearly, but I don't think that you brought them to present tonight, but I think we did get some comments and feedback that worked their ways into some edits that we made within the business plan and the way that we worded things or prioritized them, but nothing that was strongly.
I can also shed some light here. When the negative comment or the somewhat negative outlook really was oriented towards this is a lot. And so there is just a question about the amount of work that needs to get done, thinking ahead of these really big initiatives that you all have talked about, the bridge, the plan, and a lot of these pretty audacious goal areas. So the feedback was, I'll believe it when I see it, right? And I think that all of that is not uncommon when we kind of think of how we got here and the energy and what you all bring to the table, and thinking ahead to the amount of work that is ahead. And that was a big part of the conversations that we had through those work sessions, was also part of that feeling of these are great. I am on board. This makes me energized for the future of the port and the city of Cascade Locks. And we are all going into this with eyes wide open, that there's a lot of work ahead of us. So there are pieces in here, and the plan is constructed in order for you to be able to chip away. And that was the feedback that we got, kind of related to that somewhat negative outlook. But that's not uncommon. Yeah, that's not. Yeah, that's not uncommon when we see these plans come out to the community, for sure. So it's always good to ask, and it's helpful to know what people are looking for as you go through this process over the next 5 years and think about some of those pieces.
How many, I mean, when you do a community, I know we're a relatively small community, but when you do these for other communities, like how many responses do you get? Because 23 seems relatively low, especially that we shared it all over the interwebs trying to get people to reply. And was it all just port employees that that replied? Which is why the port internal operations was so highly rated.
I appreciate that question, Commissioner. That's we also get that one a lot. And no, we were not, the responses were not exclusive to port employees. So that is great news. Think about, so yeah, we get that question quite a bit. So most often when we circulate a plan, yeah, 23 responses out of the community of thousands, right, can feel small. However, when you think about why people respond to anything, most often it's because they have a gripe. So great news is that most people read the plan and they're like, yeah, sounds about right. And the people who say, yeah, sounds about right, and I'm going to contribute my feedback, those are the people that usually end up submitting their notes or their ratings when we open up a strategic plan. The other piece that I'll share is when we're looking at community feedback, when you have really generalized surveys like this, numbers are most often pretty low. And so it's not surprising to see numbers like this when you are when you're soliciting feedback on a draft. So that is completely agree that 23 people, you're like, but wait, we circulated this, we had really great communication. But I can say that there's a couple of different factors along the way. There are people that contribute to why this number is 23 and not more. And that's one of the pieces when you're kind of thinking about moving forward. We know that there's been a lot of other ways that the community has contributed their input through public comment, through attendance at commission meetings, through community events, and kind of when you stop over and chat with neighbors or you see them over at Thunder Island Brewing. And so these are just the folks that we happen to capture through the survey.
I would also add that the responses that we got were really high quality across the board. Sometimes you get more responses, but you don't get any narrative responses. And most of the people who left a response to the survey left a thoughtful comment, mostly just saying like, looks good to me, happy about this, thanks for putting it together. But some folks really did leave some actionable comments. So a really good quality of responses too, which is nice to see.
It kind of stands to reason that a high percentage of the people who did participate were not just live here, but they have their businesses here and they make their living here in Cascade Lodge. So obviously they're going to be more involved because they have business interests and other things that really plug them into the town. As we were when I was mayor, I told people, I'm operating without a net. I have my business here. Everything is here. So, obviously we're plugged into the town partly because our whole life is here, not just, we're not working somewhere else and living here part of the time.
Yeah. And you'll see it because the port has it now, but I don't know if you all caught the number of survey responses. The majority of folks who had responded to the survey had only lived in Cascade Locks between 1 and 5 years. So that also signals to us that you have a really engaged community of folks who kind of have recently moved to the Port of Cascade Locks. So there's a good mix of folks who are coming in there, they're engaged, they're thinking through the plan, and really kind of contributing feedback from that community forum as well.
Thank you for the presentation. Is it possible you could share the survey comments to the commission?
We don't typically share survey comments because they were reflected in the in updates to the plan. And because I think that there was a section of the survey where we make commitments to confidentiality. So those are pieces where when we open up people's actual comments, we like to preserve some of that stuff.
Well, if there's no further questions, I would entertain a motion.
Make a motion to adopt the 2024 to 2029 Port of Cascade Lock strategic business plan.
I'll second that. All right, there's been a motion and a second to adopt our strategic business plan. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. We have a new business plan.
Go guys.
Thank you for your all of your help on this. You've done a fantastic job.
Yeah, thank you. Both.
Our
you
very much.
pleasure.
A delight.
Yes.
Mr. President, Mark Stevenson from SDAO has made it into the Zoom meeting, so if we could move him up, that would be great. Mark, we're gonna move you up in the agenda. Are you available? Are you ready now?
Yeah, no, I'm good.
Welcome, Mark.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for working me in. I truly appreciate that. I don't know. Ideally, I'd like to share my screen and where's the button? Share right there.
We're giving you permission. Give us just a second. You're good to go.
We're sharing. Everybody see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. I don't know if you want to provide an introduction or background or.
All right. Executive Director of Performance Evaluation.
Yep, so this is memo from me, so I'll just give you a little bit of an introduction. The annual performance review for the executive director position is conducted in a different way than all of the non-contract employees of the port. Mark is here to lead us through an introduction of the process. It's a much more formal process, much more legal process, and it's separate from your run-of-the-mill employee performance review. So Mark's gonna lead us through that and get us ready for that process to begin. I think July 1 is, yeah. So go for it, Mark.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Again, great to see everybody this evening. So this has really started based on work that we provided a couple of years ago. And I'm really thrilled to see that you've been able to sort of integrate that foundation that we provided into the job description for Jeremiah as well as his employment agreement. But what I thought we would do this evening is take just a minute and talk about the objectives of why we do a performance evaluation, particularly for the executive director, and then talk a little bit about the process and the overview, and then just entertain questions. So I promise I'll be brief, uncharacteristically brief this evening. With that, again, why do we do performance evaluations? Well, of course, it's all about accountability, and you've heard me lecture about accountability before, but it's really to look at how things went during the designated performance evaluation period. The good news is in Jeremiah's employment agreement, there is a defined evaluation period of June 1, 2023 through May 31, 2024. So we've got that pretty well pinned down. It's an opportunity for the board to evaluate the effectiveness of the executive director. But again, as a public body, it's important that you are publicly accountable for that executive director's performance and demonstrating to the public that he's either doing his job or that there are improvements that are needed in certain areas. At SDAO, of course, we consider this best practice, and we certainly encourage that. We review a lot of job descriptions and provide a lot of support to organizations like yours. I have yet to find a job description where there was a requirement for the executive director to be a mind reader. And so it's really an opportunity to provide some communication and make sure that the board is telling the executive director, and the executive director has an understanding of what the expectations of the board has. It, in this case, also satisfies a condition of the employment agreement. It's an explicit requirement of the agreement that Jeremiah has. And you may want to use it as a basis for compensation decisions. Based on these results, you may want to review the compensation, make adjustments as appropriate. But that's all sort of a retrospective view of why we do performance evaluations. And I want to suggest to you that perhaps even a greater reason for doing performance evaluations is the forward-looking view in terms of establishing goals and expectations for the next evaluation period. And so one of the things that I will work with us to hopefully achieve is to establish updated goals and priorities for the executive director for that next evaluation period, to use that as an opportunity to kind of make sure it meshes with the organizational goals and priorities. And I'll talk about that in a second. And last but not least, it's just accountability for performance for the next evaluation period. So while we always think of performance evaluations as a backward-looking exercise, I want to suggest to you that it's an opportunity to really rethink how we approach this and really focus it on the future as well. So I think it's just awesome that you just adopted the updated strategic business plan, because it's almost like I planned it that way. Part of the reason that you establish objectives is to help move the organization forward. You do that through the board strategic business plan, and it really starts here with establishing goals and priorities in the strategic business plan. From that, you move forward and you start to implement and think in terms of, okay, well, what do we want to achieve and make that happen? You will, over time, do tracking and reporting. You'll get updates in terms of the progress on how we're doing. And then subsequently, you'll address and assess how we're doing. Maybe it's time to then update the goals and priorities, and the circle of life continues. How does that have anything to do with the performance evaluation for the executive director? Well, if planned properly, the goals and priorities in the executive director's performance plan have a great deal of overlap with the goals and priorities for the strategic business plan. From that, the expectation is Jeremiah implements to work towards those goals and priorities. You do the evaluation, part of the reason we're here tonight, and then you maybe either update the criteria, update the position description, update the goals and priorities. But again, the goal is that, again, it's a sort of a gear moving forward, and if done properly, these two gears are meshing, and that's how you're moving the organization forward. With that, here's the process that I suggest that we use, and I'm certainly open to additional refinements, but this seems to work well with the commission schedule as well as my schedule. That tonight, it's just a quick overview of the process and the schedule. On July 2nd, my goal would be that we will spend a little more time. I will be there in person to review the process in detail. If you have any questions, I want to present the evaluation criteria that were part of Jeremiah's employment agreement, get confirmation from the commission that you for sure want to continue to use those if there's any additional refinements that you want to make. And then I will provide a form for your adoption, and that form will also include a scoring, a rating scale, if you will, and because we want everybody to use the same basic structure, the same criteria, the same form, the same rating scale. Assuming that you approve that on July 2nd, then Jeremiah will begin his self-evaluation. That self-evaluation will be made available to all the commissioners by July 9th. So a 1-week turnaround for Jeremiah's evaluation. He will share that with each of you, at which point then each commissioner has an opportunity to complete their own evaluation. You will have about 3 weeks to complete that process. I want to stress that the evaluation needs to be done independently. No sharing your homework with other members of the commission. And so you will each independently complete your own evaluation using the approved criteria and form, and return those to me by no later than July 30th. At that time, if you haven't returned it, I'll be hounding you. Brad will attest that I can be pretty ruthless in terms of following up. And we will get all of those pulled together. I will put together a summary. And then on August 6th, your next regular meeting, we will meet presumably an executive session because we will have established criteria. And in that session, we will review the performance summary of everybody's rating. And the goal will be to reach consensus in terms of what information, what feedback you want to provide Jeremiah. You can then meet with Jeremiah in executive session, provide that feedback. Jeremiah has the option at that point to either have that review done in executive session or in open session, totally his call. And then once you've had the meeting with Jeremiah in open session, I would encourage the commission to then basically adopt the findings, have a public, process that basically approves the summary results. And that becomes essentially the public part of the evaluation process. That is the game plan. That's how we can make this happen fairly expediently and consistent with all the requirements that we have to satisfy. And with that, again, so by next meeting, we will have for you clarity in terms of the evaluation period, the evaluation criteria, rating scale, and a rating form that everybody will use through this process. If we get approval, then we'll just move on forward to the next step. With that, I'm happy to field any questions, comments, concerns from the commission.
Well, I will say that Mark did a wonderful job last time. I'm guessing that this time it may be a little smoother. Through no fault of his. But
Yeah.
As far as the commission adopts process criteria and forms, are you going to, I guess, Mark, are you going to be the one that comes and says, this is how we've done it in the past and give us kind of an outline, or is that something we need to make up?
No. Again, I mean, this is based on the work that we did 2 years ago, but you've honored my recommendations at the time, and in Jeremiah's employment agreement, that criteria has been established. And so I want you to review it. We can talk about it because it's important as you conduct your evaluation that we all have the same interpretation and understanding of what those words mean. But I think the criteria is pretty well set at this point based on what's in his employment agreement.
We'll have like almost like multiple choice. There'll be criterion question based that Mark will have written, and then we will give our opinion on how we did 1, 2, 3. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. And again, we'll give you a form that basically outlines the criteria, and I'm a fan of basically school grading system A, B, C, D, F. And but we can talk about other options if you want to pursue that, and that's how each of the commissioners will complete their evaluation.
An additional question, if you don't mind, for the accountability performance during the next period, would some of the criteria be post and some of it looking towards next year expectation?
So the criteria is all the sort of retrospective looking back, but on the form that I provide you, there is going to be a very specific question of what goals do you have? What expectations do you have for the next evaluation period? So that's where we spend some time talking about the future looking part of this thing.
I have a quick question. Is there a standard process outlined for like matching compensation increases to the ratings that are given, or just?
No, in a word. It's really entirely subjective and the judgment on the part of the commission in terms of how you want to approach that.
Okay.
And the other part of the question would be, well, do we have access to compensation information for other executive directors for other ports? And the short answer is no, we don't do that research. If you wanted to pursue that, that would be like an HR Answers sort of salary survey.
Or we just go look at every port's budget and figure it out.
Right.
Like when you're a kid, you get so much for an A and. No, what's
I was just curious. I know there's like a lot of companies have standard procedures already written for how a compensation lines up to different ratings and stuff. With like a cap, so.
Yeah, there is not a scale, not what I've seen in terms of this position for sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks, Mark.
Great.
Mike.
Thank you for working me in. I will see you next month.
Hey, Mark, at the end of this meeting, can you forward each commissioner the email that I sent you that had a copy of the job description and my contract, et cetera? I don't believe they've seen those.
Okay, all right. Can I send it to you? I'm not, well, yeah, I'll need all of their emails anyway, so I'll put it together. Not a problem. I am happy to do that. Just to, I need to follow up with you tomorrow anyway, Jeremiah, so I will do that.
Sounds good.
Okay, all right, we'll be in touch.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Mark.
All right, that sounds like fun. Okay.
Everybody's gonna be so nice to us. Gonna be awesome.
Employee handbook.
My favorite flowers.
Employee handbook, update.
Okay, thank you, commissioners. The fourth employee handbook update has been completed with the incorporation of the new paid time off PTO policy, following the commission approval of that change at your last meeting. Staff is now recommending approval of the new handbook effective July 1, 2024, subject to final legal review and approval by the executive director. We have received from a wonderfully eagle-eyed staff member one change that will be part of the executive director changes. They found a pay period reference in the handbook as being bi-weekly, and we are not paid bi-weekly. We are paid on the 5th and the 20th every month, so we'll be making that change, and it'll be part of it, of the executive director's update, and the final legal review will be one more quick wash through. The human resources representative on Cable Houston, which is the court's legal counsel, has reviewed the document and made all of their changes that they needed to make. So we're ready for approval. The next step for us, should the commission approve the handbook tonight, we will be scheduling at least 2 meetings, an all staff meeting and an all supervisors and managers meeting, which will be a page turn through the handbook. There are a tremendous amount of changes in this book compared to the policy that we're all currently working under. So we'll be going section by section with every staff member at the same time and having a management training on all of those human resources, new human resources rules, hopefully before July 1st.
Sylvia and Pam would like to make a motion to approve it, but she's not here today, so I will make a motion to approve the employee handbook update with these minor changes that are outstanding.
And if you wouldn't mind motioning to approve subject to legal review and the executive director's approval. That way we can do it the right way.
I motion to approve the employee handbook update subject to legal review and executive director approval. Given the small amendment update that Sylvia's made.
I second that motion.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second to approve the employee handbook. Yeah. Any more questions? All those in favor? Aye, is your question?
No.
Okay. You-
No, I'm good.
Okay. Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We have an employee handbook update.
Yeah.
Sweet.
It's only 79 pages.
Yeah. Yes. Just a little light reading over.
Up
Everything.
from 16?
Well, 20.
But it hasn't been done since 2006, so there's been a long time.
Good work.
Through letters of support for Hood River White Salmon Bridge Authority funding request.
Dan Marr.
Dan Marr, doing that one.
He's on Zoom with us.
Wonderful. Here I am, President Lorang. Thank you. Members of the commission, thanks for having me in tonight. Congratulations on all the business you've gotten done so far in the meeting. Getting that strategic plan passed is exciting news. I'm here with an easy one tonight, a quick one for your consideration. The port has been approached by the folks at the Hood River White Salmon Bridge Authority requesting a letter of support to support the authority's funding request to the Oregon legislature in 2025 for the remainder of the funding of the state funding for the bridge replacement project. So a couple quick points.
We already have a draft letter.
Yes, there is. I included a draft letter. It should be in your packets.
Page 146.
Perfect.
144 if you're on.
146.
Oh, really?
Perfect. Well,
And certainly willing to make edits. You know, since I submitted this to Carrie Ann, I've been thinking about the letter a little bit more, and there might be a couple things that I would do differently. Would commissioners, would you like me to go through some of the bullet points on the bridge and where we're at in the process, or does everybody feel good about kind of where we're at or where they're at?
good about supporting.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys need to go through this point by point, or are we good? All right, I think we're okay with supporting it. I would entertain a motion then.
I move to approve the letter supporting the Hood River White Salmon Bridge Authority's request to the Oregon legislature for $105 million in state funding for their bridge replacement project.
I'll put that motion.
Okay, there's been a motion second to approve the letter supporting for the Hood River White Salmon Bridge Authority funding request. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Fantastic, motion passes, and I said I do. So, good, we're good. Thank you, sir.
Stay put, Dan.
Stay put. And we
Wonderful.
have a-
Thank you all.
Legislative update.
Also, Dan,
Yeah, right on, just right into the next.
Okay, I'll keep holding the conch here. So great. Well, thanks for having me on to talk about this. I'll be quick here. Of course, we're moving toward the 2025 legislative session. Recently, Jeremiah Genevieve and I met with Kevin Waters, of course, our champion on bridge funding over in the Washington State Legislature. Like the Oregon legislature, the Washington legislature will be launching into a long session in early 2025. There's some dynamics happening across the river in terms of transportation funding. There's a repeal measure on the Washington ballot in November. It's a referendum on the Climate Commitment Act, which is it's basically a cap and trade policy that Washington State uses to fund its large transportation projects. And so we've got some dynamics. We're waiting to see how they play out. But we had a good conversation with Representative Waters, kind of on his look ahead to the legislative session, and really walked away from that meeting feeling confident about his support for an ask on the Washington side. We, to be determined kind of what the legislative context looks like. Depending, that will depend on what happens in November with the repeal here and a couple of other factors. But sounds like we are all systems go should we choose to pursue the matching funding for the $6 million on the Washington side. So that is that's good news. Here locally, active transportation conversations have been happening. I met with Renee from Friends of the Columbia Gorge to talk about their Towns to Trail project, which is a pretty ambitious plan to link up trails on both sides of the river that would total about 200 miles in all, connecting all of our local Columbia Gorge cities. So an ambitious plan, a real generational project here with a lot of segments that would need addition and rights of way and acquisition and so forth over the years. But it was a good conversation to talk about how our work on trails around Cascade Locks could fit into that broader plan. There's also some federal money coming into the region. It looks like it'll be coming through MCED that will address active transportation needs around. I think it started around the Hood River White Salmon Bridge replacement, with the question being, once bikes and pedestrians can cross that bridge, where do those folks connect? So the Federal Highways Agency has some interest in that. And it sounds like they're expanding their scope to think more broadly about active transportation, kind of throughout the gorge, and really focusing on both the Hood River White Salmon Bridge replacement project and the Bridge of the Gods. So Kathy from MCED is handling that conversation, but we're excited to hear how that is scoping out and see where that could lead us here. On the federal front, we're starting to see, the every 4-year tradition of the work starting to slow down federally as folks are thinking ahead to the presidential elections. We here are looking at a new member of Congress. Of course, Earl Blumenauer is retiring at the end of this year. Since we all last spoke, of course, the Democratic primary for that congressional seat happened, and Maxine Dexter emerged victorious. And so unless something very drastic and dramatic happens, she'll be our next member of Congress representing Cascade Locks. Maxine is a physician. She's a Democratic legislator out of the Portland area. And we will be reaching out to her team. Of course, she still has to go through the November election, but as the presumptive favorite, folks already starting to line up to invite her out to see their projects and meet their organizations and their folks. So we will be reaching out to her in due time to get on her radar for, of course, when she takes office in the coming year. One other thing at the congressional level, Commissioner Peterson forwarded this along, and that Senator Wyden will be hosting his Hood River County Town Hall coming up just next week. Looks like it's on Wednesday, June 26th at 10 a.m. at the Hood River Valley High School. So I will be out of town visiting family in the Midwest that day. Sadly, I won't be able to be there, but I'm happy to work with you all to talk about what the message is from the port, and if folks want to get together and talk about kind of the mission there, I'll make myself available for that and follow your lead. I think that's about it for the legislative update. Do folks have any questions?
I think so. No, thank you.
Yeah, I know the Towns to Trails project, Renee's been working on that for a number of years. They've kind of realized the difference between the trails here and the trails in Europe is in Europe, you can stop at and there's drinks along the way, and there's, short pieces of trail that have places to stop and places to drink. And that's kind of, you can stop and get cheese from a local monk or something like that, but I know the way, it's 900 kilometers and there's all kinds of places to stop. So they're trying to emulate what they have in Europe that we're kind of missing here. And I think it's a great idea, go to some of the businesses on your hike. So that's great to see that coming together. So it's good that we're working with her on that.
Yeah. Well, if the port wants to authorize a fact-finding mission to Europe to study what they do well over there, please let me know.
If you want to do the way of St. James, we'll totally, we're behind you.
They had like espresso bars in the middle of like nowhere mountain.
Oh, you can.
Area with nice baths.
Yeah, you can go on a hike and gain weight, like cheese and beer.
It was great.
Every stop. Yeah. Well, there you go. Right. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it.
One thing I should mention, and I'll confirm this with Senator Wyden's staff, but Senator Wyden typically doesn't do the pre-town hall meet and greet with local elected officials in the same way that Senator Merkley does. So I'll talk to Bree Irish from his team and just confirm that they're not doing that this time as well, and let you all know. But typically around Wyden Town Hall is just open to the public, starts at its designated time, 10 a.m., lasts about an hour, and they take questions via ticket.
Well, I'm sure Bree will probably, we can connect up with her and work with her on getting together with Ron possibly. Fantastic. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dan.
Take care.
Yes, Genevieve. Grants discussion.
Yes, so we have two pretty hefty discussions we're gonna ask you to have amongst yourselves here during this meeting, and just wanna, we've been in the meeting now for an hour and 15 minutes. I wanna give you a chance to grab a sandwich if you want to before we start the grants discussion, or should we just plow right in?
I'll grab a sandwich.
All right,
You wanna take a
Melissa,
bite?
it's arranged, yeah.
Take 5.
Sandwich.
Grab-
This one might be healthy, so get your, energy boost here.
Give us a second, pause the recording.
Dan. And swallow this one.
Welcome back, and we are continuing our discussion about
We have two pretty hefty discussions for you this evening. Two sides of the coin of grants. During its annual budget process, the board established a grant funded projects line item. And we're going to talk about making grants first, and then we'll talk about seeking grants second. So we've got a little slideshow for the discussion for you. And then you want me to do the advancing, right? Yeah, okay, so I'm calling this support grant fund discussion number 1. I don't know how many we'll end up having, but this is certainly not the last discussion that we will have. So it's just the beginning of the process of you as a public body becoming a grant making entity or formalizing your new process for grant making. And so if that it's probably because it's a PDF, right? You gotta go down the pages. You gotta go down to that one. Okay. So just a little bit of an agenda for our discussion. We're gonna talk about the grant fund. We're gonna talk about how it ties in with our freshly adopted strategic business plan. We're gonna talk about the currently anticipated applications that will be coming your way in this fiscal year, which is not a complete or exhaustive list. And then we want to have a discussion over our grant program priorities and eligibility criteria, really setting the parameters for the grant program. And then talk about how we want to make these award decisions, potentially through standing up an evaluation committee. So the next one. So as I said before, in our annual budget planning process, the commission established a court-funded grants line item of $260,000. $110,000 of that is already committed to the city of Cascade Locks via an IGA. And that is for the purpose of providing local match funding for an already approved U.S. Economic Development Administration grant for the electrical system upgrade. That leaves us with $150,000 to award this year. So in our strategic business plan specifically, talking about this process that we're going through starting tonight is goal 2, objective F. Specifically calls for continued and expanded collaboration with local businesses and our tenants to support business expansion. And this is an important point in terms of just our overriding philosophy of grant making. These are not charitable donations. These are finance agreements. These are for a purpose. We expect a deliverable on all of our grant awards, and those deliverables really have to be tied to economic development. The port is governed by ORS 777. There are some things that we can do with our money, and there are some things that we cannot do with our money. What we can do is economic development. So that's really sort of the overriding principle of all of this. And it's important that we remember, again, that these grants are not charitable donations. They are investments in partnerships for economic development projects for our community. and to achieve our mission. Also, goal 2, objective F, specifically calls out supporting the creation of a chamber of commerce or similar entity. And in that, you can read a nonprofit partner that is also focused on business retention and expansion, and service to the local business community. We also talk about completing a business retention expansion survey, either ourselves or in partnership with other entities. Goal 4, objective O, specifically calls for the implementation of a formal application and project reporting process for the Forward Funded Grant Program. We'll go to the next one. You've already heard directly from a couple of the potential applicants for this year's grant program. You've heard from the Cascade Locks Historical Museum. Janice Crane was here. She reported on last year's funding, as well as the Hood River Energy Council reported on their work last year. You've also heard from the Northwest Trail Alliance. We can add to this list. We have received interest from Cascade Locks Fire and EMS. And I neglected to put on this list also the Hood River County Sheriff's Office is currently fundraising for a safety boat. Landmass Wines, which is a current tenant, has expressed interest in applying for one of their projects. And as well as Cascade Locks Ale House for an improvement project. And we know of several community events which may also be seeking funding. That is not a complete list. That's just to give you an impression. You've got $150,000. These are the folks that we feel really confident you'll see an application from. Next one. So next we want to talk about setting the priorities of, or the parameters rather, for our grant program. And for this purpose, I'm going to be prompting you, if you go to the next one, prompting you with a set of, I think I've got 8 questions for you to talk amongst yourself, come to consensus if you can. And we will use these decisions that you'll be making to answer these questions to set up the parameters of the grant program. So question number 1, and they're not really in any logical order, but they kind of are in a logical order of, the first question is, does the commission wish to set a maximum and minimum grant award amount? So for instance, would you entertain an application for the full 150,000 and just do one award? Do you want to keep these sorts of awards relatively small? Do you want to do only $5,000 as a limit or $25,000 as a limit? This is something that you should come to agreement yourselves and at least for the first fiscal year, set that parameter. I can roll through all of the questions if you want to first and then come back, or you can discuss each one as we go along.
Yeah, I don't know, at least for myself, I don't know if we need maximum or minimum. It will partly depend on, if somebody has a small grant request, obviously, but I'd say it partly depend on the merit and how much it benefits our own goals as far as, is it part of the downtown revitalization plan? Is it part of our priorities and our goals, and how closely does it align with those? And I think that, a larger award, I would say, and it partly would depend on how many requests we have. If we have a lot of requests, like when I was with the Arts Council, we might have divided it up evenly, and there were some that didn't get any, but we tried to not, throw it all in one pot. It partly depended on how much were they contributing, how much sweat equity did they have in it, what was the component as far as long-lasting benefit to the community? Was it something that was going to be kind of a bricks and mortar improvement, like a mural or something like that? So I think it would be based on, at least for me, it would be based on the merit of and overall good for the community.
I guess it can, I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, I just tend to agree with not limiting ourselves to a minimum or maximum. I mean, it kind of leaves, I think a con to that is that it leaves it open for our requesters to just request the whole 150 and hope for the best, you know? But then we can just determine from there, like how much we actually want to give them. Okay.
Go ahead, Edward.
I'm gonna say. I think there's pros and cons to both, right, to setting it or to not setting it. If. A pro to setting this is that we don't run into a situation where multiple people ask for $150,000, right, and then we don't have to deal with that. Also. But the con of. Setting it is that there could be very viable, reasonable requests that are incredibly high. I think your particular example, Brad, what kind of comes to mind is that kind of gets into a subjective world of like, oh, this is merit based, so I think we should give them more or something like that. So it feels like there needs to be some sort of criteria around what the award amount is.
Yeah.
Not necessarily max or min, but some sort of
Like
merit.
have a deadline, everybody submits by, review all of the applications and then review it against like a set of criteria. On how closely it meets our business goals and that whatnot.
So have a request deadline.
And give a percentage, and then, you know, if we've got 150,000. And some of them ask for quite a bit,
Right.
then we give a percentage, you know, obviously if they're asking for 150,000, but no, because we want to give some, you know, some of them that are asking for a little bit and, you know, then it's, you know, you could
Right.
possibly give them nearly the whole amount or the whole amount to those, but people are asking for a lot.
But if we only
You
do,
know, I know that when they were going through the grant process with the fire department, Jeff Pritchard had a really good record of being able to get grants because he looked at previous grant requests and he said there'd never been one awarded over a certain percentage of the ask. And he looked at every single one for a fire engine and he said they've never awarded over this amount.
yeah,
So we have to stay below that amount because if we request more, we won't get anything.
Yeah, all
So-
of these restrictions, you should think of as helping the grant writer. Because folks like me are strategizing our applications for the greatest chance of success. And we really want to know, okay, you're not setting a limit, but is there a preferred limit?
Yeah.
You know, maybe it's not a hard and fast, maybe you wouldn't automatically say no to a huge request, but you would prefer something.
lower amount, maybe they wouldn't be able to even kick off their project.
Exactly,
at all.
yeah.
The form that we had is pretty inclusive, they had to put in how much they were investing into the project, both in kind and actual monetary and, you know, timeline of the project and, you know, future goals for certain types of projects. Okay, this is phase one, and then next year we're gonna be doing this, so, you know, what are their goals? How does this help achieve both their goals and ours?
Right.
That is
And we're gonna get to more of those, do you wanna require a match, do you wanna require, we have, you know, there's lots
Okay.
more questions beyond just this, but it's all linked.
I think the
Yes.
first thing to get to this answer is to actually have an application window of maybe 3 to 6 months out of the year, you can apply for this grant. And then we have a 3-month vetting process where we look through all the different offers, applications. And then, you know, from there, in our first year, it's hard to set limits, because you wanna see
You wanna see what comes.
where you can make the most impact and also diversify that impact in our
Okay.
community goals, you know, as a commission, like, we want some to go towards recreation, some going towards safety, some going towards other, you know, mission objectives we have, so.
Yeah.
I think we need to first start there, and then we can, during that application review process is where we can determine our first minimum and maximum amount that we can reasonably accommodate, because we're only dealing with $150,000 in funds, because 110 is already allocated to the city project. So, you know, there's gonna be a lot of people interested in this, and along those lines, we shouldn't just strictly make it to government and nonprofits only. I think businesses should be part of that. they usually have a lot more impact economically because they have more employees. Traditionally, nonprofits are very scarce, unpaid employees, so.
Yeah, and we'll talk about tax status restrictions.
Yeah, so
also,
I think in the beginning, we should really strictly say a percentage of only the business, only the nonprofit, and only the government. I think this is our learning year of what's
Okay.
gonna be coming, so.
I think there's a risk to sometimes giving too many of them too little. I mean, if you divide it all up and nobody gets enough to really achieve their goal, I mean, if they have a goal of something that's gonna cost 60,000 and we give them 5,
Right.
then, you know, they may not never get the funding, enough funding to do what they wanted to do, so we've really achieved nothing.
Yeah,
So we have to kind of balance that with, okay, how much, also, how enthusiastic are these people and how much effort have they put into this and how close are they to being, you know, how much money of their own do they have in it, how much in kind, how much effort have they put into this, and how close are they to achieving it? So our money that we give them will kick them over the edge to be able to actually do something.
we do have a question for you on project readiness also, yeah.
Yeah, I think what you're touching on, in something you mentioned earlier, Brad, was the idea of the criteria, right, of what if it is tiered in a sense of if you want more, then you have to employ more or bring in more XYZ or put in XYZ more sweat equity and actually do a tiered system from a, if you're going for 0, I'm just making this up, 0 to 10,000, then it's X. If you're asking for 10 to 50,000, it's X. And then we can come up with those pretty good criteria, because you're right, like the idea of someone needing $60,000, we only have $150,000, that's almost 50% of what, right, we would be doing. So if we're gonna be doing something like that, we want to make sure that the grant and the funds that we would be giving on for this, one would complement our strategic business plan and actually make an impact, either economically or employment or some sort of other criteria that we have part of our business plan. So if we have it organized like that, then I think that we could basically have a minimum and a maximum while also not having fun.
Mhm. Okay, and you could establish a small grants program and a medium-sized grant, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is right now, at least, we're not gonna set a minimum and a maximum at this point in this discussion. Okay, next question. Again, just at this point of discussion, does the commission wish to restrict eligibility based on project readiness for its life stage? Will you fund planning activities and program development? Will you fund general operating expenses? Do you want to be the first dollar in? Do you want to be the last dollar in? These are considerations that we should also have, you know, a general sense of your consensus on these issues. Just like you were just saying, if you have a $65,000 project and we only award $5,000, you know, what are the chances that project will happen? Well, it depends on what their other fundraising strategies are and, you know, if they've got already a match committed for other fund, you know, that 5,000 could be actually 10,000 to them because they've got a match program happening already. And so it really kind of depends, right? It depends on the case.
We also had sometimes oftentimes follow-up questions for, you know, the respondents had their applications and we'd have like those types of questions. We'd say, okay, what do they have as far as this or that, and oftentimes you go back to them with follow-up questions about, okay, what do you have as far as, you know, how ready are you to move on this? What other things do you have? You know, anything that was maybe not clear in their application. So we often did go back to them and ask.
I think this question number 2, I look at it as it's a viability and vetting process.
Okay.
How serious is your project? What's the likelihood of this coming through within a set period? Preferably within the calendar year of the grant period, you know, usually is how grant applications work.
Timeline should be in that, you know, in that question.
And some sort of accountability involved with that, giving reports along the way. maybe some transparency to the expenses incurred and showing some proof of that. I know the city has recently implemented something like that on community fund awards that are over $2,500, they ask for receipts, and stuff like that.
So that's in the reporting process, but initially, how do you feel about funding general operating expenses versus just projects? Do you feel okay about that? You know, there's concerns on the grant maker side of things. You know, where generally there's a reason it's difficult to find a grant for operating
They're paying
expenses.
themselves with the grant.
Yeah, the concern not usually on,
So.
right, that's a great example, and also the Energy Council is also,
Exclude them.
right, and the Energy Council as well is asking for funding for staffing. So if we are okay with that, it's important to think that through. Generally, the reason it's hard to find funding for general operating expenses is because the grant making entity is creating a dependency, a multi-year dependency. Where if you make a grant for 10 years and then on the 11th year, you can't make that grant, then it's a harm to that organization versus an aid. And so it's something to think about. I think we've had a great track record with those entities that we have been funding general operating, but it's a question that we have to ask you. Are you okay with that? Is that you want to go forward with that?
What would happen to the museum if we stopped funding?
Exactly, and that's the question you have to ask yourself.
And when that started, if you go back and look at the budget, that was only supposed to be a 3-year program.
And this would be annually, you know, so it's a question we need to ask is, you know, and it,
And
again,
if we can solve that, then
Yeah.
I'd be okay with saying no to general operating expenses, but I don't wanna be the cause of our museum going away.
so at least for year one,
You also,
You're okay with
the other thing to consider in that is if we come around budget season next time and we don't have the money to put this program together, right? Because you guys have made other decisions and it's like, I can't find money this year to create this grant. And the museum's gonna be in that same situation. And it will be us that didn't provide that money to just the other side, the flip side of that coin, of course, I'm saying, stuff.
So having started a business here in this town, I will say that one of the most difficult things to get done was you couldn't find funding unless it was your own, or you use no bank to give you funding unless you already have a year under your belt. And then how are you supposed to get a year under your belt with a business if you don't have funding?
yeah.
So that was by far one of the hardest things, other than insurance, which was weird, but one of the hardest things to get situated. So for something like this, when I think of the eligibility, I guess it comes down to a fundamental question of, do we want to help net new businesses get started, or do we only want to help those businesses that are already here? And I think us as an economic driver, we have to help those new businesses as well.
It's a balance between existing and incubation of new businesses. So, and that's part of the objectives. What are the objectives of these grant deciders at the port? You know, what, we want to be able to fairly allocate the opportunity to both parties.
Right, well, if you look at, the incubator space was a type of sort of a grant process in a way, because we gave very reasonable rent to Thunder Island originally, and look at 10, 12 years later, the fruit that it bared.
But we're not a bank and we've already made a mistake and some people thought we were a bank and we did more of the banking and money up front. And then that is what got us, that started this whole audit nightmares because the auditors don't know how to deal with that because we are not a banking institution.
Right.
But
And
if
that's
you do
just it,
that, then how are you gonna get that money back or if they don't make it?
Right.
Then
But to Genevieve's point, this is not a charitable,
Yeah.
it's not a charitable situation.
No, but
This
you're
is
saying that the startup funding was the hardest, but
Yeah.
that's.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to fill those gaps, you know, and it's nice, you know, this is not common. I don't think there is another port in the gorge that has a grant program that I'm aware of. And so this is unique to us, and I think it's embedded in our strategic business plan as within the context of truly filling gaps and partnering with businesses and organizations locally to share the load of this
Right,
tremendously audacious goals that we have in both of our plans.
right.
And so what I'm hearing right now is no objection, at least in year one, to general operating support. And no objection, at least in year one, in being the first dollar in. So if a project, again, let's say there's $100,000 project, that's a multi-year project. Are you okay with being the first grant of maybe $20,000 that starts their fundraising process to go for other grants to build up to their project budget? Or do you prefer to be the last dollar in, or you're okay with both scenarios?
Meaning your 20 could sit for a couple
Your
of
20 could
years.
sit,
I still think it needs to come down to criteria.
Yeah.
Just like question one,
yeah,
like we're to your point, like we're not a bank, right?
Right.
This is grants that we're using to help drive economic development
Right.
within Cascade Locks.
right,
So it comes down to, sure, we can, in my personal opinion, like we can be involved from the very beginning, but there needs to be some sort of criteria involved. Like, we need to be able to see some sort of business plan. We need to see what is actually in place.
I think
before we just give someone like $20,000.
And I think you drive towards criteria.
we get
in here,
close.
So
right?
in the strategic business plan, has, you know, how closely does it match the criteria in our economic development plan as far as, you know?
Yeah. Right. Okay, so we'll go to the next one. Does the commission wish to, we already kind of talked about this, but does the commission wish to limit multi-year funding for the same project? If so, what would be the limit? And the follow-up question to that is, could the same entity submit for multiple projects in the same year or multiple years? Do you care about that? Do you want to kind of leave that open and see what comes in? It's nice, again, all of these, if we can get to pretty close to solid answers on these questions, it is a big help to the grant writer because they know the rules by which they are playing so that they can propose a project with the greatest degree of success.
Right.
So if a project is something that they can see, we're gonna need 3 years of funding, we want to submit a grant, you know, for the first year, but have you know, we will be back in year
If
two.
it's the second year, I would certainly say in the criteria as far as their information that they provide for the criteria of the grant, I'm not opposed to the idea of multi-year funding if they can show progress. If they're towards an ultimate goal funding a specific thing, then I would say, okay, if you're creating a film, how far are you in the process, you know, or anything else? If you have if you're doing a mural, where are you at in the process of doing this? Is it partly finished and you need more to finish that? So I'm not opposed to the idea, I think, of multiple year funding, but certainly want to see in the questionnaire progress as far as there will be an end to this. I know for a number of years, we funded, tourism gave a large block of money every year to the CGRA. And one year it was for boats, and that's great, you know, because they were using boats to do teaching for kids and that sort of thing. But then, you know, giving them $20,000 every year was basically, you start going, okay, well, maybe your organization needs to maybe up your dues a little bit or something, or up your entry fees so that you become a little more self-funding rather than having part of it be always get that money from, you know.
I think a good example here is, you know, take a look at Pacific Northwest Airlines. And they're working with the Forest Service for multiple years. It's gonna take at least 5 years to get this new 15-mile trail system built. they're gonna be the type of person who'll be asking for a renewal each year. Kind of similar to how the museum does it. I think we first need to establish our priorities, like, for example, 25% of all grant money has to come towards recreation and parks. So if it fits that category, you know, we can set a cap limit of like no more than 10% of remaining funds in that allocated purpose goes to one entity, you know, so.
I would say that's a perfect example of one that each time they apply, they say, okay, we did 15 miles. Now we're doing another 10 miles. So that's progress each year. Okay, yes, we're funding it each year, but you've got something concrete to show that you actually, you know, achieved something with the money that was given. That
It's part of the quarterly updates they have to do. If they commit to a multi-year contract, there has to be some sort of quarterly report submission to show proof of tangible investment that
absolutely
done, you know.
Okay, so that's, no limit on multi-year funding, at least in year one. You can always redo this next spring, but for the first year, it's a benefit to the entity to know the rules. So if I am an applicant and I know that on year 3, I'm ineligible to apply, then I'm writing my fundraising plan based on knowing that I cannot approach the Port of Cascade Locks in year 3. If that's a mystery and I don't know that, then that's information I don't have when I'm building that plan going forward. So it helps to have these concrete answers, yeah. Okay, so the next one is,
each year the hoop might get a little smaller.
right. This commission wishes to limit eligibility by applicant tax status. I think you've already answered this, but I'll ask for consensus again. You're okay with making grants to for-profit businesses and government entities along with nonprofit organizations?
I don't know why we need to give a grant to a government entity. You're talking about like McKed.
Well, we're giving $110,000 to the city of Cascade Locks. And Cascade Locks Fire and EMS is a likely applicant at the Hood County Sheriff's Office.
I think the metric for that is how many jobs is it created locally here? That's one of our goals that we should be focusing on. So some sort of measurable metric of the impact in keeping local, either residents here or keeping those people here engaging in our commerce. You know,
so that you're tying that to the tax status or just general criteria you want to rank on
more specifics for like a for-profit entity.
Okay.
You need to measure how that impacts. Obviously, with the nonprofit, you have to be a little bit more organized with your mission and vision. And grants are a common thing, but for a business, usually there's not much of a grant cycle like you see in nonprofits or government. So I think we need to be a little bit more specific for-profit businesses.
Okay. All right, next question.
Well, then, I assume there'll be a single set of criteria, not criteria that is specific to each one of those types of entities.
Yeah, I would imagine, so, yeah. That would be a huge mess.
Admin in general on this is grows exponentially.
Yeah. This is kind of, you know, by setting these parameters, you're in a way, setting the stage or controlling the types of applications that you're gonna see. And, you know, I totally get it. Year one, you probably wanna see what's gonna come up organically. But you can also help everybody out by setting these parameters and saying, you know, this is the arena that you're playing in and these are the rules of the game and it applies to everyone who's playing. You know, it can simplify things a lot.
Right. So you're saying like, it would simplify it a lot if we just said, cool, $10,000 grants, 5 go to rec, 5 go to tourism, 5 go to new businesses.
Yeah. So for this question.
So let's do that.
Yeah, it's coming there. This question though, you're all okay, no limits based on tax increase.
I think in our first year, but I have a feeling the city is probably gonna be asking for a lot of support in the first year. And we'll have to set some sort of balancing act between city nonprofits and for-profit, you know.
Okay, next question.
I think we need to set parameters too on like what we fund and what precedents that sets. So if we're gonna fund the Cascade Locks Police Department, for example, that could set a bad precedents.
And that's why we ask questions like multi-year funding and general operating expenses. You know, it's good to set those rules.
Right.
You know, and just keep in mind, you are not the only funding source for any of these applicants. And it's okay to, you know, put our applications in a certain box that we know we can manage. And that's what these questions are geared towards. So in your memo, I had these two next questions separated, but I think they kind of go together, so I mashed them up on this slide. Does the commission wish to put other limits besides tax status or life cycle stage on grant eligibility for this fiscal year, such as location within the port district? I think this is actually a legal requirement. And specific focus area or activity type, like recreation, downtown, you know, water safety, you know, do you want to establish some specific focus areas and give each of those focus areas a budget, a strict budget, or do you want to have sort of general rule of thumb that these, we would like to see applications in these priorities?
I would certainly say within the port district, if not within, I would say within the city limits of Cascade Locks, you know, because.
We'll check the legality on that, just because we collect taxes within the port district. So I just want to we'll check the legality on that, on.
Coopersburg could be eligible.
Coopersburg could be eligible.
I was gonna say,
It's whatever. Only because of that reason. I mean, I totally see what you're saying, but for that reason, we'll check the legality on it and get back together.
And I don't think that we're legally allowed to make an award outside of the port district. I don't think legally that we can make an award in Skamania County or in Hood River, for example. I think we do have to keep it within the port district.
What about the head though?
But their economic development district is the Mid-Columbia that includes all of those counties. Our district is geographically bound, and so we're only operating within our.
And they operate within our.
They also,
Yeah.
they also are the administrators on the,
Organization board,
and also the, Hood River County Economic Development Group. They do the administrative work on that. And so that's how we wind up paying for that work that they're doing for us. Versus us writing a grant, they do actual work for us.
Right.
Also, does it involve, like, do we want to restrict the grant money to be within an EDA zone? Something that the port qualifies for monies with, and then we can allocate that to, you know, similar projects in that same zone, or are we okay to go outside those zones?
I think I'll fall back on, yes, I'll run it past Tommy and see what Tommy looks at ORS 777 and says, yeah, it needs to be, and I'm sure it's gonna say that. I mean, we're supposed to be creating economic development within our port district, and so outside of our port district, for sure not. And then us picking and choosing which parts of the district. I mean, that's a slippery slope. That's a slippery slope with the grant. Not that the decisions that the board makes, the way that you guys want to spend your money, but when it talks about giving money to eligible entities.
Restriction, but I definitely would say preference, once again, do anything that most closely aligns with what our strategic business plan priorities are.
right.
And I think, and
That's activity type or focus area.
that probably does work.
Yeah, and that from a staff perspective, we would love to have that come out early spring as part of your annual planning process. It says this year, the grant fund is going to be focused on these focus areas of our strategic business plan. And if you have a project that can deliver results on these focus areas, please do apply.
But yeah, if we're talking downtown, something that will help with downtown revitalization, you know, somebody wants to come in and put a tile mural or something in part of the downtown, or some other sort of thing that has a lasting value that helps with the revitalization of the downtown core. Even if it's a business that, you know, wants to get a tarp off their roof or.
Could even be simple artist grants, yeah.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe wants to get rid of the police tape in lieu of something a little more cosmetic. We don't.
At the Port of Hood River, I know there's like art installations all along the waterfront. Was
Yeah.
that an actual grant process for those people, or?
Not for the, that's,
that whole project is by an organization called Art of Community, and their branding is Big Art, and it's a really cool program. The Port of Hood River's contribution to that is the spots, the land that hosts those sculptures, but it's a really cool, they did do a sponsorship of a couple of the spots and actually purchased 2 of the pieces for permanent installation. But the port did not award a grant to Art of Community, however, Art of Community was grant funded.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, follow-up question is, are there any types of projects or programs that the commission wishes to make ineligible this year? Is there anything you don't want to get an application for?
Data centers.
Data centers?
I knew you were gonna say that.
Okay.
Something that doesn't fit within the values of the national scenic area. It has to fit in with the environment and benefit the community.
And it has to fit into our strategic business plan,
I think
which
that's a really safe way to do it.
highlights environment.
There, this is strategic. plan.
Yeah, those real safe.
Okay. All right, so that was question
So think they're all
7.
in.
Right,
So,
or
Do we wanna limit, like. If the grant is supposed to be helping economic development. Like. Kind of going on this data center thing. What if the company is far too big to even need it, but they just come and be like, oh, well, they got free money, we're gonna try to get $10,000 out of it.
Right.
Boom, Google comes in,
You can
it's like,
certainly-
oh, we're not gonna do a data center, but we're gonna hire 10 people.
Yeah,
Like, they don't need $10,000.
yeah, you can
So do
certainly
what?
set a limit, an annual budget limit if you'd like to. You know, there recently. We've been supporting a local business on a couple of grant applications from corporations. And one of the most recent ones was a grant that was awarded by Venmo. And they had a $50,000 annual budget limit. If your business made more than $50,000 last year, you were ineligible to apply. So you certainly can do something like that if you choose to have a focus on, small business micro grants. That's when that would maybe come in. So that's something.
I think it's probably important to say that we're not making any decisions tonight, right? This is a conversation that we're having, this will go through a process, we'll have legal review it, we'll make sure that we know where we stand in our ORS 77, that the court knows that we're going through all the right steps in this, but these are all things that help us facilitate those conversations when you guys aren't in the room. So.
I think you're absolutely right, this is discussion 1,
Discussion 1. Giving you a lot to think.
Even with what we're talking about right now, I don't even think I would be ready to even.
Yeah.
Approve
And that's
anything
okay.
else.
That's okay.
No, that's,
I think a good example here too, setting limits to what their annual budget is, look at the example of Thunder Rock Brewing, 10 years ago, what was their annual budget then when they were in the incubator space? And look at them now, they hired 25 people in town, it's consistent work. And obviously, they don't really need to be in a position to ask for grants anymore, so there should be some sort of budget limit
Okay.
as it grows.
That sounds great. Okay, next one. The commission should, we talked about this already a little bit, just organically, the commission should set grant program priorities and focus areas as part of its annual budget process, annual planning process every year. For this year, which types of projects would the commission like to favor as a high priority? And it might be too early to ask you this question because you did just like a half hour ago approve your strategic business plan, which had a huge list of projects and priorities that we have not yet organized into our year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5 work plans. You may want to, as we go forward in our grant making, you might want to tie those priorities to the port's current year work plan.
Well, I would say. Whether it's business development or bricks and mortar type improvements of the downtown revitalization area. Because that's a high priority of the community, whether it's public, some sort of a public project, as I said, like title art or something like that, or some other type of
Beautification,
bricks
there's
and mortar type improvements on, whether it's on buildings or, if somebody needs a little bit of money to, help with, something that will help bring a business in. Great, you know,
There is the buzzword now is welcomability, and there is grants available for storefront beautification projects specifically for that, wayfinding signage. those
and it may be
projects.
that it's part of a match that they could get for a, you know, maybe we could provide the match for a larger, as like a, downtown revitalization project, through, Oregon, Main Street.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times they'll have a, you know, they'll have a 20% match or something like that. If we could provide the match, and then they can get a grant. To
I
do something
think,
else.
I think I'm with you though, I think this one's probably too early to answer, I personally would like to have it. Somehow tied specifically with our plan.
Yeah.
I think it would just be smarter and more strategic for us if we
Yeah.
start looking at not only this year, but. How is that going to impact over the next 5 years, because that is our strategic business plan.
Yeah.
Okay. One thing I just observed from just looking at our big events each year, there are important properties, in our proximity to the Pacific Crest Trail, it's obviously recreation. And that's a growing thing with this new trail expansion, so I think at least. I'd say at least 20% of our grant funds should go towards the recreation and park purpose. You know, because that PCT days is continuing to grow every year, it's our biggest event in the park. You know, we need volunteers to maintain those trails to be safe, in partnership with the Forest Service on their lands, also. You know, bathroom facilities, obviously you just got one over on Moody Road, but there might be a need for facilities elsewhere on the east end in the business park, you know.
Would those be grant programs, or that be something that we need to do as a board?
I feel the port probably has the resources to seek out grants to build bathroom facilities and stuff like that, but,
So
other
does the
partners-
Forest Service, and so does.
I mean, there's also,
Yeah.
there's also the Flex 6 idea of like, are we going to have one tenant there, or is this gonna be a multi-tenant idea there? Does it want to be office space? Does it want to be a co-working thing? Does it want to be a warehouse? We have to kind of answer our goals for the business park and other areas, you know.
Right, but the grant program is for grants that we give to other people, not necessarily, we wouldn't grant ourselves money
No,
to do something like
the
that.
next conversation is about grant seeking.
Yeah.
So we'll get to that next.
Right.
Yeah.
I think this year alone, you know, Northwest Trail Alliance, for example, is showing the effort to actually do some trail building now, and we can see that basically happening every weekend. So I would say at least 15 to 20% of our grant
Yeah, I think
fund
recreation
should be towards similar, you know,
Okay.
purpose, so.
So we've got, so far beautification, welcomability, recreation, and recreation amenities, maybe.
Yeah.
Any other focus areas you'd really like to see somebody else?
We don't have business space really to have shops here. The only shop you have is the Best Western gift shop. And then
Retail.
local artwork in the small, you know, businesses in town already. That are kind of ad hoc, they don't have their own, you know, specific presence. But
So you
I
think-
think the biggest driver would be providing office space or funding towards. Building a office space availability in town.
Office space?
I have an idea on that.
Okay.
It's what you about to say the other day.
And remember that this isn't, these aren't the only partnerships that we'll be doing, this won't be the only ways that this board is going to spur economic development, this is really the ways that we go, cool, someone else is doing the work, I support that, we'd be terrible at it, we don't have time for it, but that's a good project.
Right.
So some of those things, we're still gonna absolutely get involved in, you guys are gonna be spending court money on those things, this is who do we let spend our money, because they're going a good direction, and we've got a strategic business plan that we're focused on. It sure would be nice to, not, and I'm still with the idea of supporting a strategic business plan, but there's also things that may divert from that, you go, that's cool, but we're too laser focused.
Right.
Right.
It'd be great to have. It'd be great to have a whole suite of applications that achieve the goals of our business plan, but is okay also. If somebody's doing some work that we're not doing, that we want to fund, so
Right.
that's good. Okay, so the next question is, and maybe this is a little bit too early, is talking about how do you want to make these decisions? One way to handle this is to establish a grant evaluation committee that would receive all of the applications and score them based on the solid criteria that you set each year and presents to you once or twice or however many times a year, that committee's recommended awards. The commission would have to make the ultimate decision on each of those, but you could utilize a committee. You can DIY this if you want to take that sort of work on. Staff is recommending you establish a grant committee, and we've included for your consideration a possible template charter for that committee that could help launch this program going forward. We would want to have their help in developing, based on your wishes and answers to all of those questions, your parameters for the grant program, your priorities, preferences, restrictions, limits, and they would be able to score each application based on that. As you know, before scoring them, help us develop the application form itself and the questionnaire.
I think from a transparency standpoint, having a subcommittee that has citizens that sit on it would be fantastic. I think that's.
So what we've included, you can probably stop the screen sharing, but in your packet, there is a draft charter. If you would like to go that way, we could begin to accept your nominations for persons serving on that committee. Our assumption was that we would have at least 2 commissioners and I think 3 citizen members. Okay. Yeah, so three at-large members, citizen members, and 2 commissioners that would serve on that committee.
Where was that?
What page? Page 152.
No, it'll be in your. Yeah. Sure.
152 on the print packet, 180 on the different thing.
Online sounded like it was 2 pages. So this committee would. They would do the standing up of this as well? Okay.
I mean, I feel just basic impressions, I feel like, commission probably needs one more discussion, at least on its preferred, grant program parameters for this year. And any committee is gonna need that from you, that guidance from you before they can do their work. And so,
I'm kind of of the mind is like open the floodgates and see what we get.
Okay, there you go.
I mean, what do we know what we got.
Yeah.
And I like to see
It's-
Paul.
We can't really appoint anyone tonight because Pam's not here, so she hasn't given feedback at all on this, so.
Oh, I don't think we'd be appointing anyone tonight, we're, right?
Yeah,
We're just talking about it.
this is just what it could look like, if you guys felt solid and you wanted to move forward and do that now. My feeling is that we're not quite at that solid position yet to be able to do that, maybe need one more discussion, workshop or with the regular session.
I agree with that.
It's a lot to think
It
through,
looks pretty good.
yeah. And again, I'll just reiterate, grants are not charitable donations.
Right.
And setting those clear parameters and those clear rules, it feels like you might be pushing people away or limiting things, but you're really helping them plan their business approach. This is a new funding source, and it's being able to have real clarity on what the rules are, really just helps a lot. So, we would want you to get, pretty solid consensus on those sort of parameters so that when we set up the forms and the scoring sheets, we know what those are based on by your preferences, so.
Cause it can be subjective.
Right.
In your experience, grants how do you guarantee accountability for first time grantees? Like, you know, what prevents someone from asking for money, they pitch an idea? It seems like it's vetted and then all of a sudden nothing happens. How do you recuperate that?
Yeah, well, and that also plays into kind of a overhead accounting burden for the port question. It's generally a lot easier on the grant maker's side to award the grant either upfront or half and half at the start and half upon completion. Reimbursement grants are a lot more, there's a lot more accountability there. There's a lot more, you don't get your money until you show me your receipts. And that this has paid. So that's another preference that this body needs to decide about. $150,000 is a relatively small grant amount. You can set reporting criteria based on grant award that is sort of tied to that risk level. You know, if you're making a $5,000 grant to a committee, maybe you would, to develop the downtown, let's say, you might want to do that as a front-loaded grant so that they're not having to submit receipts, but at the end of the year, they need to submit those receipts along with their
criteria on that, on a particular grant based on what they say. If they say they're paying a contractor to do some renovation or something like that, then you say, okay, you know, kind of like, yeah, we'll issue the check to the contractor or, you know, or in the amount of the contract, and we want to see receipts or.
Yeah, and so that can be a tremendous burden on court staff to do it that way. If the
Right.
court is acting as sort of a live action auditor of all of these projects.
Okay.
So the commission does need to come to a certain comfort level of risk. You know, what Rob's talking about is the worst case scenario. You award a grant, you write a check, the guy disappears and he doesn't do
Say,
the
okay,
project,
well, they're not,
right?
we didn't hear back from them, so they're not getting one next year. Yeah.
And we will have some overhead, of course, legally with development of
We know.
every award results in a grant agreement, which is a contract between us and the business. And so
Gotcha.
there's a little bit of teeth in that contract that we can make sure that if the project is not complete by a certain date, then those monies have to be refunded. You can work that way, but you guys do need to kind of say, you know, how much of a gamble are we willing to take on folks?
I think it would be helpful to see what other courts do for their grant opportunities, just a comparative analysis.
It might not be other courts, it might be other grant funders. There really aren't other courts that have this sort of a program going.
And traditionally, a grant application window is like 3 to 6 months out of the year, right?
Say that?
Traditionally, a grant application window is only a couple months out of the year.
Yeah, it can be, you know, 45 days to 6 months, you know, it kind of depends on the volume that you expect and the amount. I think personally for me, $150,000, I think you could award all of those in one cycle. If you give everybody enough time to get your applications together and you have enough clarity. So folks aren't kind of guessing and stabbing at the dark where I'm a local business owner, I could use $100,000 to do this. Do I develop a grant application for that, or knowing that the most you're gonna award is $25,000? Well, that's easy. I'll tell you exactly what I'm gonna do with that money. So those sort of parameters can really help people sort of strategize how they approach, so. Okay, so that's the first half. Anything else we want to talk about, Jeremiah, did I miss?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think specifically the couple of things that you touched on were keeping in mind the administrative work and overhead that will come with this. The more that they come with it, I think that's something to keep in mind. And that also this is the first year of a program that may not have a second year, right? So that's something to think as well too. We may go through this year and go, that's not the way that we want to spur economic development. It just doesn't work for us. But I will tell you that there are a number of courts that are struggling right now with how they get money out into the community. That's something that all the other courts talk about. Hey, how do you guys do donations? And it's like, we read ORS 777, donations is questionable at best. How do I get money out into the community? So I'm of the opinion that when you guys set this program up, that this is something that other courts will follow, because it follows within what we're allowed to do in ROS 77 to create grants. And it's in a very, very transparent way of doing it that is fair. So I think what you guys are doing here is really important work. But we want to get it right, and we also want to know that this is sort of a new thing that Upward is doing, right? And so maybe we go down the road and we go, we should increase that. We should increase the more money that we push out there because so much good work is being done with it. And if we do, then we can start to look at, well, this is the way, this is part of what the court does, and we can start increasing the administrative costs to it. Now, if we start giving out instead of 150, we start getting out $500,000. Maybe we do want to do reimbursement grants. So there's room for this to grow. So this first year where it's like, well, let's see what happens. Let's keep it to a smaller dollar amount. Let's not make so many administrative costs. That's probably the right approach, with a chance to go, nope, not doing it next year, or yep, let's make this better and better every year.
So that's great discussion. Take a deep breath. Now we're gonna go look for money. So, grant funding targets for year one. So with the adoption tonight with the board's strategic business plan for fiscal years 24 to 29, an important next step is to chart a path for grant seeking activities that will provide the best chances of supportive funding for port objectives. In our strategic plan, objective L, quote, maximize port revenue, includes a directive to update the port's grant program, including methods of identification, pursuit, and administration to strengthen the overall grant strategy to help achieve the goals identified in the plan. And I personally and professionally feel that communities with ports are just so lucky in this respect, because we have communities that have ports have so many other new opportunities to seek funding from programs than communities that don't, maybe that are only working with a city and a county administration that have their own budget constraints. And so we're really lucky, and we want to make the most of that luck and make sure that our impact on our local community through our grant seeking activities, it goes beyond port operations. It really, as an economic driver, as we say in our mission statement now, and as the economic development entity for this city, that really should be our perspective going forward. We're not just looking to fund port operations, we're looking to fund the economic vitality of our entire community. And so this is a discussion to sort of lay some groundwork. Again, it might be a little bit too early. I'm asking you to talk about this stuff the same night you approve the plan, but we've been working on the plan for a number of months and we know what's in there. So we can make some informed discussion around this. Firstly, I wanted to, again, got a little agenda here for how this discussion should unfold. One is I wanted to talk a little bit about the community adopted plans beyond, including our strategic business plan, but also beyond our strategic business plan, that list projects that, because they are listed on a plan, a community adopted plan, are eligible for grant funding at the federal level and also at the state level. So just a quick overview of the plans that we're working with now. Then we're going to talk about the port has more than one role in our grant seeking activities. We're not only a sole applicant of a grant, and we're not only looking to fund our own operations, although that helps and that's important. It's not the only thing that we can do in grant seeking. And then I'm going to talk just a little bit about some of the known grant opportunities that we have to us at the various levels, and have you guys talk a little bit about your first year, second year priorities with federal funding opportunities. It's really minimum 1 to 3 year time for a federal grant, if you're lucky, and there isn't major election disruption. So that's a very optimistic number, 1 to 3 years. So just keep that in mind. So we'll go to the first. This is a list of the community adopted plans that I have read through and can key off of in grant applications. There's obviously the port's strategic business plan adopted tonight, the city's strategic business plan that was just adopted earlier this year. And then there's the SEDS list, which is the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy for the Mid-Columbia Economic Development District. This is a mouthful. Have any of you guys been involved in the SEDS process? Brad knows what it is?
SEDS plan every year.
Yeah, okay. So MCED
If you're
is,
not on the list, you can't get in.
yeah, exactly.
You gotta get all your projects on the list for the year.
Yeah.
They make up a comprehensive list of
Exactly. That's exactly what they do. And
all
MCED staff
plans that will be
is,
eligible for potential grant funding.
exactly. Again, it's an exercise of getting your projects on a plan so that when the application says, is your project on a plan, you can say yes. And especially if it's a high priority, the SEDS process does have a priority listing. The Hood River White Salmon Interstate Bridge and affordable housing, for example, are sharing the #1 spot.
And
on
are
this
they
year.
shovel ready is a big
Yeah,
part of it. They
it's a
have
big
to be
help.
ready to pull the trigger on these things in order to, which means you
Be on
have to have
sets.
you have to have a plan if it's traffic lights or something like
Right.
that, so the port paid for, planning for,
Yeah.
out of our own pocket for a number of things that we could get on the SEDS list.
Right.
So,
And, folks understandably get impatient with planning and, oh my God, we need another study. Why do we need another study? Well, it's usually part of a required multi-year process that hopefully results in a multi-million-dollar grant award. So, Parker and I both are working with the county representatives on an update to the Hood River County Natural Hazards Mitigation Plan and the Community Wildfire Protection Plan. And Parker and I both have been racking our brains with what projects can we put on those plans. One of the beauties about those plans is that once it's updated, it's updated. Those projects don't have to go through a planning commission review to be on that list. They just have to be recommended by the staff of the government entities that are doing that work. And so that's a really great, exciting process that's underway right now. And then, of course, there's the STIP, which is the statewide transportation improvement plan. As you all know, Cascade Locks resides within Region 1, which is also the Portland Metro region. So their STIP is gigantic and it's a lot of work to get a project on the STIP. But once your project is on the STIP, it opens up the doors for state funding. So those are all our current, fresh, new plans. Below, you'll see that we still also have the City of Cascade Locks Comprehensive Plan, their downtown plan, and the Cascade Locks Transportation System Plan. None of those have been updated since the early 2000s, but that's okay. It's a lot of work to update those plans. Yes.
and expensive.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
By us getting the 6 million for the bridge,
Yeah.
is that part of SIP?
No, we'll talk about that later. If Dan's still on, he's gonna talk to you about the Christmas tree bill.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
I was just curious,
Yeah.
can we sort of connect? Is Dan still on?
I don't know if he's still on.
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm here. Affirmative.
And he's gonna talk to you about congressionally directed spending.
Perfect.
One plan that we don't currently have that we really need, and this is me speaking both professionally and personally, is something called community investment plan that is, quote, multi-jurisdictional, multi-sectoral community investment plan. And it's really exciting that Denise was here tonight to talk about standing up a new nonprofit and partnering with multiple jurisdictions, for-profit businesses. Having a nonprofit partner is something that we need to do to create a community strategic investment plan that will make us as a community eligible for what's called SEC-D funding, which is priority funding for federal programs through USDA, EDA. Once they see that you have done this working together plan and you have established your what's called a community investment plan, and you go through the SEC-D process, it's a really, really good thing to do in order to attract those larger dollar federal grants. And so it's wonderful that Denise was here. It's very timely, and it's something that I would recommend that the commission pursue in year 1 and 2 of our plan.
Our original planner, John Morgan, pushed us to try and try and do that exact thing over 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And was
It can
really
be a
pushing
huge-
the idea of incremental tax financing and this whole process of a community
Setting,
investment
yeah,
plan, et cetera, so.
So that's
a
a good,
lot of
sorry,
communities used that. Cottage Grove has done
Yep. yeah.
a lot of work on their downtown. I think Oregon City is currently
Mhm.
doing
Yeah.
a lot, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
And with the infrastructure, Jobs Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, there's lots of money for rural projects that, really get a boost from this SECD process, so. So that's a list of our plans, just want you to kind of understand the role of plans within our grant seeking. And so the next one is talking a little bit about our roles, like I was saying before. There's multiple roles that we can play in grant seeking. We of course can be the lead sole applicant for a project. We can be a partner in a joint application. We can be a provider through our grant fund of all or a portion of matching funds for another grant. This is exactly what we're doing with that $110,000 with the city. Is providing the local match requirement for a federal grant. Generally, federal grants cannot fund more than 80% of any project. So 20% is a burden on the local community. You've got to come up with a 20% match. We can obviously provide letters of support like we did tonight, exactly for the Hood River White Salmon Interstate Bridge Replacement Project. We can provide in-kind contributions, technical assistance, and probably my least favorite is acting as a fiscal agent. I almost didn't put that on the list, but it is something that we can do. It's just something we don't want to do. Except for a really, really good project. Because there's a lot of overhead. So now I want to kind of start small, local, and just list for you all of the opportunities that are available to us. Actually, not all, this is not an exhaustive list. Somebody's gonna think of one that I forgot, and please speak up and let's add that to the list. But these are the programs we're looking for. So affiliate grants, we're a member of the Special Districts Association of Oregon. They make 2 grants a year. They make a safety and security grant, and they have internship grants. The safety and security grant usually has an SDAO established focus. Sometimes it's cybersecurity, sometimes it's tripping hazards, sometimes it's, whatever, lighting or security cameras. And so every year, it's a very simple application. We should apply every year. It's usually about between $2,500 to $5,000 and requires a 50% match. The Experience Mount Hood Gorge tourism grants, those are funded by a portion of the transient lodging tax. We have received this grant this year. We applied for $19,000 to fund our local match for the Bridge of the Gods Trailhead restroom, and we were awarded that grant. That hopefully will be something that happens every year, and it's generally tourism visitor experience type grant. Also, of course, the Chamber of Commerce, the Visit Hood River Tourism Development Grant is another small award that we could go for beautification projects or help somebody else apply for something like that for welcome amenity. And then, of course, the Oregon Investment Board, they do make grants. It's very, very rare. Usually those come in the forms of loans, but there is a grant program there that is, I wanted to keep it on the list.
Before we move on, so the SDAO safety and security grant, we also have the internship grants. Could you?
Yeah, the internship grant will fund the salary of a paid intern for a certain period of time. That intern has to result in tangible benefit to the member organization. And for example, Port of Hood River, we used a SDAO internship grant to hire 2 paid interns for a summer to completely digitize our archive.
We could do that.
Something like that, so that's something that we can do.
What about towards staffing of processing these grants themselves within Port?
Say that again.
For example, what about towards internship for grant applications?
For writing grants?
Yeah, considering, if we,
Yeah, grant research intern.
random example, you have 15 grants that we give out next year. The staff is short
Yeah,
the board could apply for an internship to help process that
yeah.
a little bit.
You know, I mean, internships are generally not something that reduces overhead.
Right.
Because you're trained, it's an educational opportunity for the interns, so there is training and oversight that is required. But it can help, you know, once you get through that, you know, training, assign a project. They can get something done in a summer vacation
Or
time.
towards like a tourism office, part-time position.
And there is usually something like there's usually specific,
There's
right?
usually
Usually
focus.
SEOs, yeah, the focus is
Yeah.
like this year, like the year you guys digitized, it probably
Yeah.
was focused on
Right.
something
Or the
around.
archives.
Yeah, archives.
So I mean. I get where you're coming from, like, we could come up with like 500 different things that they could probably have as interns, but it really comes down to you guys, and I guess the question would be, I guess, to you, since you're our shoulder.
Yeah.
Um,
He's a workload.
do you all see a need or a reason to fill out for an internship grant, and how would you use that?
It
If
depends.
so, then please do it, and if not, then
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah, it depends what the focus is. If the focus fits is within a space where like, oh, great. That we've even been needing to get that done and didn't have the manpower, then yes, for sure. If it's something where we're like,
Well, that's what I'm getting at, is like, you guys are the ones that are in, like, in
Yeah.
That's how we
the
got the
field,
playground.
right? So it's like, do you guys feel
From
that
the
you need it,
SBA,
and if so,
Not from
then.
SBA, but from, kids right out of college and stuff.
Oh,
But and she wrote the grant and had the playground, yeah, and it was dedicated while she was still here and everything.
it's good for you to be like,
Really,
Right.
really is hard.
So what I was trying to finish saying.
sorry.
What I was trying to finish saying is that it's really up to you all, if you all think that this is worth it, and then you guys would be able to identify exactly what you need, but it seems like.
Yeah.
Something like a digitization could be something helpful, or anything that Robert just said, like any of those things could be helpful, but really ultimately it's up to you guys, and I would suggest.
Yeah.
If you see it and you identify that you need it, I would totally do it.
Thank you.
We're volunteers.
Yeah, we're volunteers, yeah.
They're also awarded by grant.
Well, and really, and that's honestly true for every single one of the programs that you're gonna see, and it's a temptation that we kind of hope that you as commission will avoid is, let's create this work to go for that grant.
Yeah.
We need to flip that.
Yeah.
And really need to say, let's line out our priorities, what we want to get done this year, and go find the grant that's a good match to what we want to get done.
Right.
And so it's great to see that way, to where we as staff will be coming to you and saying, you want to get this done this year, this is a way to fund that. Versus, hey, there's this great grant, why don't you create a project and go for that money, you know, that's not the optimal way to do things, we're hoping to be more.
Those are just some of the folks that I think frustrate you as elected officials, where they're like, oh, there's grants for that,
Yeah.
right? And really, it's the project, and then go find the grant that will fund it, that's hard work. That's where the real work is, and
But it's the better work.
it's the better work and it's the hard work, to go find a grant that's available and then magically pull a project together. That's sort of the busy work piece.
Yeah, I'm starting to see how complex this will get for the court as a staff, if we have some grant applicants who will totally use our grant money on condition that they get this other grant from another third party.
Right.
And then like
Yeah,
what happens,
it
they
gets
don't
really
get that, the
complicated,
process
yeah.
doesn't move forward, because they don't have all their money, you know,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
There's some eligibility requirements we need to really iron out.
One of the very conservative efforts as the executive director that I made was that we're going to get very, very good at chasing dollars. And it's hard work. Like Genevieve is very good at it. She's been very successful at it, but it's not easy and it's not particularly fast. And it's frustrating and you don't always win. And sometimes you don't win the first year or the second year or the third year. But if you have somebody who's effective at it and you make yourself as a board focus on chasing those dollars, you can be really, really effective. And it's a concerted effort. And Genevieve comes with a ton of good qualities, but one of which is paying for her own salary through the money that she acquires to the sport.
We can get a grant for that.
It's just, thank you, that's really nice to say, it's also never really about the staff. It's always about the project, and the grant evaluators on that side, they can get the most beautifully written, perfectly written grant, but the project's no good and it's not a good fit. And they are gonna fund, you know, the not perfectly written grant where the project is, you know, the project comes first. And so it's all about project fit for those funders, not so much on the art of the grant.
And not every grant writer would tell you that.
Yeah.
So then I guess
Yeah.
to that point, and to that spirit, as we go through these,
Yeah,
do we need to look at it from the vantage point of we already have a project and it's with fit?
Mhm.
Or is this kind of you just saying, hey, these are the ones that are available right now?
yeah.
Kind of more of an
Yeah, and it's really a sense of letting you know that there is a vast diversity of funding that is available to you because you are a special district local government.
Right,
And you're an economic development entity, and
Right.
so, there's just a lot that you can do. I don't think that there's any, well, I shouldn't say that, I was gonna say there's no activity we couldn't find funding for, that's not true. But in your strategic business plan, there are 50+ projects that are eligible for funding from one of these projects.
perfect, okay. So then, if we go through all these, we're gonna be like, yes,
Yes,
do them
let's
all.
go, yeah. Well, maybe, but you know, we gotta kind of, the timing is of
Right.
the essence also.
Right.
You guys just officially have money and getting to do projects.
Yeah.
So it's making sure you're
You know, the budget this year, like was grant funded, you know, we have. Was it 9.7 altogether that we got as grants?
Yeah.
So that's pretty good, 9.7 million.
That's great.
It's
Great.
more than I got in my bank account.
So the next level, obviously, is state of Oregon grants, and I've just listed these by department. I won't go through each one of them, but I'll mention the department and you kind of get the gist of what they fund. So the Department of Transportation, the Connect Oregon program is great. This port has received an immediate opportunity fund grant in the past. There is currently the Innovative Mobility program and safe routes to schools and a sidewalk improvement program. So the program themselves kind of tell you what they fund.
Right.
DEQ currently has a materials management grant program that I wanted to list specifically because of the dialogue about the burn pile and the, you know, what the city's got going on with the community's ability to dispose of our garbage. And so that might be something we want to look at in partnership with the city. Business Oregon are our best friends, and we were terrible grant recipients in that we did not acknowledge that the Business Oregon grant funded our strategic business plan grant development or strategic business plan development project. And that was funded by a $50,000 grant by Business Oregon. So thank you, Business Oregon, for funding our successful project. But the Port Planning and Marketing Fund is great. Their staff is amazing and they do multiple site visits and they will provide technical assistance all the way up through a project. They're wonderful to work with. And of course, they have brownfields grants available through them. Community Development Block Grant is something we might want to look at for that multi-jurisdictional effort. And there's of course the Rural Opportunity Initiative, which is going to be important for us. Travel Oregon, we have received Travel Oregon grants in the past. They're great. They come up every 2 years. They're a competitive program, usually awards at around $25,000. And then Oregon Parks and Recreation, who are really literally our best friends right now for our trails projects. We currently have active both a local government grant program grant and the recreational trails program grant. They love to fund you year after year after year. So there's no multi-year funding. If you're successful and a good applicant and you work with good partners, they would love to see you do more good work. And so that's certainly targets that we will have in our first 2 years. Department of Energy, the Oregon State Marine Board makes small grants for ports with boating facilities that helps with the maintenance for the boat launch. And then they also make larger grants, which is kind of interesting for boating and facility improvements. OSMB engineers will help you with the permitting process for a project that they are funding, which is incredible amount of support. So they're great. And then, of course, we have 2 applications currently pending to the Oregon Department of Human Services for the Resilience Hub and Networks grants. We should hear before the end of this month whether or not we got either of those grants. And then if Dan is still awake, I wanted him to talk to you about the Christmas tree bill in the Oregon legislature as an avenue to funding for us that is coming from the state. It will be coming from a certain department of the state, but it doesn't go through this formal application process. It's more of a legislative process. So Dan, are you still there?
That's right. I am. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Make us go away from, there you go, there he is.
Great. Hey, everybody. Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about the Christmas tree bill. Christmas tree bill is the colloquial version of the end of session omnibus bill that the Oregon State Legislature tries to pass basically every session, both long sessions and short sessions. And so it is just what it sounds like. It's kind of the all the presents under the Christmas tree at the end of session once legislators figure out how much money is left in the budget to spend. Legislators come in with their list of priorities. Our bridge funding ask came through the Christmas tree bill this year. And so Representative Helfrich, Senator Bonham, they both submitted, our request along with a number of other requests from around their districts. And then some behind the scenes horse trading happens. And then eventually a final list emerges based on how much money there is left for the legislators to spend. So really at the state level, I mean, especially compared to how the feds do it, the Christmas tree bill is pretty wide open. They'll fund projects. I'd say it's pretty heavy on projects, but occasionally they will also fund, programs, staffing, and even some kind of ongoing funding. Of course, the typical caveats apply is that it's one-time funding, so no guarantee that it comes through again. And there is kind of a dynamic there where legislators tend to let organizations take turns and kind of adjudicate that, based on legislators' own priorities, but also where money has gone in the past. So those are dynamics that, we have to stay aware of. Like Genevieve said, the money comes through the legislative process. And so the legislators themselves are making the decisions, but there's always going to be an agency who the money passes through, who's kind of the fiscal stewards of that. And so in our example, we're signed on a memorandum of understanding with the Oregon Department of Transportation, who is our fiscal steward here. Genevieve, anything else you want me to talk about on this, or commissioners, any questions on the state of Oregon process?
Just generally, Dan's role here at the port is to facilitate the exchange with our representatives, specifically when that timing comes up. So Dan is our connection to Rep. Jeff Helfrich and Senator Bonham. And, so if we have something that we want to propose for the Christmas tree bill, we really need to arm Dan with specifics and a good argument and a good need statement and a good political statement, frankly, for that funding. And he's fantastic at it. And so that's something that we'll be looking at in every legislative session. So when you hear us talking about the Christmas tree bill, that's it.
That's right.
Go ahead, Dan.
I was just saying that, this, this is really a part of the ongoing communication with legislators, whether, we're leading up to session, in session, after session, we're always thinking about projects. We're always keeping those folks apprised of what the port's on, what's in the master plan, kind of what the, what commission's priorities are. And so, I think of this as just a kind of a bedrock piece of relationship management with those offices. And our legislators are certainly doing us, they're helping us, they're champions for our projects. They're doing us a solid when they help find money. But I like to think of it as us also solving problems for them, in that the legislature gets a lot of money each year to distribute, and they want good projects, and they want projects that they understand, that their staff understands, that they can go to bat for, and that once the projects are in process, and especially once they're completed, that the appropriate appreciation is given. So we'll be doing, we put out a video, we'll be doing press releases, As the studies come out, as we talk about, the project as the money gets deployed, we'll continue referencing back to the legislators that helped us get it. Just all part of the good process.
Genevieve one time said it pretty simply, which was when it goes to our legislators, how do we help you help us?
Yeah.
And most of the time it's educate me, give me the tools necessary to sell your project, to understand your project and help other people understand your project.
Right.
And Dan is the one who facilitates all that. And when they say, this is what I need in order for me to help you, it comes back to us and we make that happen.
Dan, the question for you is traditionally for a Christmas trilby type ask, is there a general timeline when you want to ask that, like by the third quarter? Or, I mean, or is it something that could be like literally the last month before a session closes?
Good question. Yeah, really good question. I mean, so the actual, the bill itself, it's basically a product of the session itself. So in the odd numbered years, it's the longer session that lasts, 5 or 6 months from the early part of the year until kind of, late June and into July. And so all throughout session, legislators will be submitting their priorities to legislative leadership. And so kind of, the typical process is for stakeholders or requesters to be putting in those requests kind of in the early part of the session. That's kind of as late as you would want to do it. My approach typically is, if we have the project, if we know what we're going to be asking for, that we're talking about it to these legislators months in advance. So the more lead time, the better. But then when you get into actual session itself, that's when it becomes crunch time. And then the closer we get to the end of session, that's when the actual decisions are made. So all the other legislative sausage making happens first. And then at the end, they see how much money's left over and how much they can give to these projects. There's also a political component too, where, if there's a legislator who needs votes from another legislator on a policy issue that's happening, they will, they'll kind of use these projects to whip votes to get support for their priorities. And so that's all just kind of in the legislative churn, but the actual decisions get made at the very end of session. So in the long session, that'd be like basically June of the even numbered years, or of the odd numbered years, and the short session, even numbered years, it happens, I guess, in early March.
And
So, I'm assuming that a lot of these projects kind of have to echo the priorities of the state, kind of their pet things that they're going on. I know that they've increased the budget for Business Oregon considerably, and a lot of that pushes housing. So I'm assuming that if our projects echo some of those things that are state priorities, as far as how do we provide affordable housing or other things that they have put in as being big priorities, such as housing and economic development. I know they've doubled Business Oregon's budget this year from $1 billion to $2 billion, and about doubled their staffing. So, and they were telling us that housing was a very big priority as far as the governor's list of things.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. It's individual legislators' priorities are important, and so is just kind of the, priorities that bubble up, the hot topics in any legislative session. Another dynamic happens as well, and we saw this in this short session, is that kind of the two big buckets were housing and Measure 110 / drug abuse / mental health. And so each of those two kind of like big policy packages had funding in them. And so if communities were asking for money for like utility hookups at a housing development or something, instead of going through the Christmas tree bill, they could go through that housing bill, because there was a title under the housing bill that was giving grants to projects like that. And so that's another. I'm glad you brought that up. That is another dynamic to keep an eye on. Coming into the long session, I think housing will certainly be a priority again. And then of course there's a transportation package in 2025. And so there will be projects that are looking for transportation funding who will be fighting it out in the transportation package instead of in the Christmas tree bill.
one of the things that I've heard from multiple legislators over the years in the vein of help me, help you, is how critically important it is that we talk to each other in the community and understand who's asking for what when. If the port just scored $6 million in the last Christmas tree bill and the city is teeing up and ask, or another entity in our region is teeing up and ask, timing wise, it might be best for us to say, hey, we support their project.
Right.
And to not just, try to say, let's think of a project to ask for. They really appreciate it if we can talk to each other and time our asks cooperatively. And if a grant fund has received a big influx of money and you have a project that's a perfect fit for that grant fund, by all means apply to the grant, not to the Christmas tree bill for that, so they really want us talking amongst ourselves and coordinating and supporting each other.
Where does the letter of supports come into play with some of this? Is this as you propose to our representatives or as they're discussing and deciding in session, letters of recommendations?
Good question. It's kind of up to the requester to decide how they want to deploy those letters of support. And so, they'll probably be used many times throughout the process. I would imagine as the Joint Transportation Committee is going around the state over the next few months doing these legislative road shows. We'll be attending one in the Dalles in the fall. And so I imagine, using the Hood River Bridge Replacement project as an example, I imagine they would probably submit a number of letters to legislators ahead of that meeting, and then they would submit the same letters as testimony once we're in the legislative session and it's taking place, and there's an opportunity to submit legislative testimony. So yeah, they'll use them in a number of different ways. And when we got the bridge funding, we asked for a number of letters of support and got them as well. We sent them to, I guess we sent them to all the transportation committee members. We submitted them as testimony, et cetera.
One of the ways that a letter of support helps in the legislature is it assures that there's not pushback and there's not objection to a certain bill or a certain funding. If the Port of Cascade Locks writes a letter of support of another project, then that representative knows that, hey, they wouldn't object to this happening, or they don't see it as competition. So that helps a lot to kind of clear the starting line, basically. Dan, since you're still here and we're pushing 9 o'clock, I'm wondering if you could also segue into, we're gonna do federal grants next real quick. But if you could really quick also talk about congressionally directed spending on the federal level, and how that works, on the federal level. It's not a Christmas tree bill, it's an earmark, but not called an earmark, and maybe you could talk about how we interface with those. Sure,
absolutely. So, Congress's process does, in some ways reflect the earmark process. But in Congress, of course, they continually meet their meeting around the calendar, and so their big timeline in where these projects and requests get placed is in the federal budget. And so, on the plus side, some of that process is fairly predictable, right? We know that congressional offices will be taking, we're just going to use the term earmark here for simplicity's sake. They're called different things among different offices and the different levels, but basically the general public, they're earmarks. And so offices take earmark requests kind of in the late winter to early spring. Typically happens around February or March. The application window opens for only about 2 weeks, so it's very brief. And again, different offices kind of open the window at different times, so it can get a little confusing. But similar to Christmas tree bill requests at the state level, you can put an application in the 2 week window, and it's the first time that office has heard of that project. But if you want to, be set up for success, it does pay to work with the offices well ahead of the application window so that they can understand the project, staff can understand the project, maybe even if you can get the elected official themselves out to tour the project, that all helps to build support. So the application window opens, folks apply. I think in the Merkley office, we got, I want to say it was, gosh, was it like 400? I think we got maybe like 400 requests in 1 year, and I think had the ability to fund maybe like 120. And so, you know, unlike at the state level, at the federal level, the process is a little bit more restrictive. Instead of it can't be any project under the sun. Each appropriations committee submits a list of basically their programs that are available for earmark funding. And so there are 12 appropriation bills. Not all 12 bills actually take earmarks. And then within a bill, say the transportation and housing bill, there are only specific programs in those realms that do take that do accept earmark requests. And so that has gotten a little more predictable over the years. Earmarks went away for about 10 years. They came back just in fiscal year 2022. So now we've been through 3 rounds, and we're all getting kind of a better sense of like what competitive projects are. Typically, an application, you know, a successful award would be somewhere between 500,000 and say 4 million. Projects that ask for more than that typically don't get funded or they get pared down. You know, and you know, I was talking about the application window. That's fairly predictable, late winter, early spring. But the final result is tied to the federal funding process. And so all the news you hear about government shutdowns and continuing resolutions and, you know, kicking the can into the next year, your request, your project funding is in those packages, and so it's getting kicked down the can. So it's one of the drawbacks of going for congressional funding. On the plus side, you know, Congress deals in big numbers. A $2 million award to Congress may not feel like a lot to us locally. That feels like a lot of money. But if our project is you know, if we're based on something like an in-water work window, or, you know, we've got other grant money that's expiring, we need to have the funding in hand by, you know, a certain date. We're at the whim of the federal funding process, which is at the whim of politics. And so, you know, requesters who are in a hurry can have a very bad time waiting around for federal funding. So that's a lot of the down and dirty about this. I could talk about federal earmarks all night long. So I'll stop there and see if there are any questions.
That's good, okay. So then just real quick, we'll talk about some federal program grants. Like I said at the beginning, you know, this is at best a 3-year window. So when you're looking at projects in your 5-year plan, you know, we've got to place federal projects sort of as the last dollar in. They are almost never the first dollar in. So there's a lot of work that goes into a federal grant application. That said, there's a lot of money right now. And a lot of programs that are have open applications right now. There is some grants that are due in July that I know for sure we wouldn't be able to develop an application in time, but the agencies that I would recommend that we look most closely at are the USDA Rural Development Programs, the U.S. Economic Development Administration, the EDA programs. I added also FEMA, the BRIC program. There is a intriguing program that I'm just learning about in the National Endowment for the Humanities, which is a cultural community resilience program. And then of course there's the Jobs Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, CHIPS Act, if we had some semiconductor businesses going on, and then congressionally directed spending. Dan is much more familiar with the federal arena here, so I will ask him, did I miss anything on this list, Dan, that we need to for sure talk about?
No, you've got a good list here. I think you're right. You know, USDA Rural Development has a lot of great programs that you know we're eligible for. You know, there's more transportation money at the federal level as well. Of course, we've got some challenges in accepting that on the bridge, but there are other projects around town and on port property that we might be able to get DOT funding for. But I think you've got a great list here.
And I don't know, do I have a second page of federal? Oh, no, so then, thank you, Dan, that's awesome. Next, moving on to, just corporate and private foundation grants. This is just a really quick list of entities that make grants to, special districts within the Columbia River Gorge regularly, as well as other nonprofits and government entities. So that's just a short list. And the next page, grants that the port is not eligible for, but we could support an applicant. The Gorge Community Foundation grants only go to nonprofits. I will talk to Denise. I really hope that the Main Street folks will apply to the Community Foundation. There's programs here listed specifically for cities. The Union Pacific Community Ties Giving Program used to make grants to local governments. They no longer do. You have to be a 501c3. But they have several program areas that I think would be great for Cascade Box. Eligible requirement is that you're a city that a Union Pacific Railroad goes through. And then there's, there's something for co-ops, museums, and of course, regular environmental and wildlife programs. So next is, again, just that the plan comes first, the project on the plan, and then we go after the grant, not the other way around. And then the next is a list of our projects. So there's 4 pages from our strategic plan of all the projects that, because they're on that plan, and some of them are actually quite ready, that we can be applying for funding for. I won't at 9:05 and then at night list your own projects to you. You know what they are already, but they're included there in that presentation as things to be thinking about. And then something skip a few pages forward. And that's it. So sorry to be exhausting. Grants are not free money. Even when you give them and when you receive them, they are a ton of overhead. They are a ton of management, not just for one staff person, but every single person at the port will be working on grant making and grant seeking. It is tremendously expensive money actually to go after. So you really need to make it count and make sure that our project is a good fit for any program that we choose to pursue.
Like playing in Vegas.
No.
Takes a lot of money and maybe you.
Maybe you'll come away with it.
That's a lot to
So I know that's exhausting,
pull on that handle.
yeah,
So we don't throw everything at home just to see what sticks.
no, we do not, that's not, we might get lucky, but you know,
We need some more internship grants. for that.
yeah. So apologies for the length of those programs, but with the start of our next fiscal year and with several grant applicants ready to apply tomorrow, it's a discussion that we needed to start sooner than later. So hopefully we'll be ready in the first meeting of July to have some more discussion on our grant making. That's it. So thank you.
Thank you. All great information.
You're up, Mr. President.
Yes, somewhere. Where's mine? There's my cheat sheet. Okay. Next. Yes, discussions, community picnic.
Sorry, I don't have a memo for this one. This was a last minute addition to the agenda. Of course, the city budget has been adopted. Within that budget, they have cut funding for community events. The one community event that we did together, that's not true, really. We do too. They usually contribute a very large amount to our fireworks. This year is $5,000, but it's coming through the tourism committee. The other one is the community picnic. Typically, we both contribute $1,250 to that. It's a $2,500 picnic that we throw. That includes a band. We have a number of different entities come out, the sheriff's department, the River County Services, etc. We flip burgers. It's usually a pretty good spread. I think all of you have been or maybe served or helped clean up or pick up. In the beginning, it was mostly the city gave money and the port gave money, and then the port put it on. As we kind of moved into over the last fiscal year, third year or our second year, third year. I think it's our fourth year. I think last year we were our third year, and last year I was pretty adamant that we were going to need staff support from the city as well. It would be just money, equal staff. So last year, we had some more staff support from the city. They were looking at the fire department cooking burgers. Jordan was kind of attending some meetings where we were deciding how the money was gonna get spent, so we were getting equal parts of that. This year, that's not gonna be possible from a financial standpoint, it's just not in the budget, so they won't be able to do that. That leads us to this discussion of where are we at with that? And part of what pushes that discussion is we need to pick a date, because those dates are ones that we can use for either other events or weddings.
August 23rd.
August 23rd is about the date that I have left.
Is that the weekend
So
after
your birthday, is that what you're?
No, mine's the 21st.
Okay.
That's the weekend
It's a
after
late
these
birthday.
days, right?
Yes, it is.
That's correct.
Because we already said that was the day that Connecticut have open.
That's real close. That's kind of where it generally falls, somewhere in there. It's always depending on what sort of space we have available, but that's pretty consistent where it's normally been. Right now, you guys have $2,500 total in your community grant fund or community. Since I would call it community events fund. In theory, that was gonna go away next year in the budget, and it was all gonna be done through the grant program, but we'll see how that grant program stands up, right? There might be, we'll see how the grant program ends up.
So if we'd spent, so we had $2,500, like basically set aside for community events. If we spend it all on the picnic, then we have nothing for the rest of.
That would be our
person.
that would be our community event this year. There are other pools, there are other places I could pull that money from. That would be court sponsored events, which would be basically next year's firework display. I pull it from early, or it would be the money that's been set aside for the.
I remember last year, there was a big demand for some sort of sanctioned event during the holidays.
Yeah, right.
But I don't know if we had that.
We didn't, so last year we didn't wind up doing a sanctioned event. We wound up giving money to a group of individuals who put that on, down at gorgeous.
Logistically, it's easier to deal with it that way.
And yeah, generally, we're not great at events. I mean, we did a great job with Captain Tom, but it took every staff member here was involved with that. On top of the workload that they already had. I know after it was all over, we all went home and were exhausted and didn't recover for like a day or two because it was a heavy lift. And you have people like your all-star grant writer, going and picking up salami at Costco, like, it's just not what we do. So it's always easier for us to throw money at it than it is staff time. But I restricted the way folks can come to us for money and gonna continue to restrict that. I need it to be in a more transparent way that's more in line with ORS 777 than us just deciding, oh, this is a good group of individuals to do this thing, right? So from a transparency standpoint and from some of that grant, the community grant stuff is, in theory, was gonna move to this program. But this year we do have the 2,500. It's been a very successful program. There's nobody who doesn't like it. We serve a ton of burgers. There's no denying that it's successful and fun and good for the community. It's just, do we want to spend the money? And maybe we don't have a band, or maybe we don't. Maybe you guys just say, yeah, we're gonna have it. You figured out you can't spend all the money. And then we go back and go, how do we cut this down to something that doesn't cost $2,500? It costs $12. And it's maybe not as big as it was last year. Or maybe instead of having a whole bunch of food left over, which we always do, we give to the fire department, which is also very cool. We just don't have as much left over this year. We're a little bit more frugal in the way we spend. So it's not a yes, we don't do it, or yes, we do it, but it is, we don't have the city as a partner in it, at least from a financial standpoint.
I think it's important to continue the tradition of the summer barbecue towards the end. We have a lot of new people in government on both sides of the aisle here. And on the communities, new.
And maybe if we partner with.
It's a great.
With some of the other nonprofits, like the Canoe Club and
Beach Street, or
maybe the fire department, volunteers might wanna be involved. We can get some,
last year, of course, people was
some,
involved. Burgers.
donation.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is that ultimately it would be really cool if there was some other entity or group that wanted to do this. And instead, we just gave them money and said, here you go, you get the pavilion, you get the park, you get the advertising that we'll do for you, and here's some money to throw it on, go get them, guys. We're better at that. That's what we did at Christmas. It would be really cool to do that again with this. Versus it being a port and city thing. But again, there's a bunch of different ways to look at it. I think the main thing now is regardless, do we want to try to have something? And if we do, then I want to lock down that date and not print it out or sell it to anybody else. I think we can solve how we get it done, whether it's a smaller budget or asking for donations or bringing it from different pots of money. But we really need to decide, yes, are we doing it or no, or not, because I can sell that as a wedding date.
The 23rd, is that Friday or Saturday?
Friday.
Friday.
I'm good for it. I think, it's, as you said, it's a good tradition to continue, and, like I said, nobody doesn't like it, who doesn't like hamburgers and hot dogs, and, everybody getting together with no other agenda than I mean, it's kind of like, this is kind of like, you know, they had the old timers picnic for years, and now this is kind of the newcomers picnic, because, you know, half the town are been here for 5 years. So,
If there's a consensus, then I'm very comfortable with, like, Jeremiah, it sounds like you have a problem, go solve it, and I'll come back with some solutions on how I come up with the other half of what the city typically did.
yeah, I'm good, yeah.
Don't take it from the centennial budget.
There you go.
Before I even turn the centennial budget, I will make you guys decide.
We can have some,
But I'll come back with some
speaking
solutions.
of grilling options as well.
I donated a bunch of burgers last year.
Thank you.
So,
I mean,
there were like
just
3 people who wanted vegan burgers.
man, it's a bummer that the city isn't financially involved with it. Is there a way that we can make sure that they at least, like, is it, because if we're completely in charge of it, then it is a court event, is that
The city's indirectly involved because, this got on the agenda as a request from the mayor.
Okay,
Because they lost their funding for this event.
but,
So they can provide staff to help us and
I hope,
volunteers.
so that's another thing we'll have to push on.
I would like to see next year, talk to the city to try to allocate some funds for a continuation of this event, which should be hosted by the city. But, you know, considering the hard issues of the city right now.
I mean, and that's always what's hard with these things, right? Is like you do them, and the year you can't do them, or goes on.
Hey,
Now you can't, right? You're the bad guys, because you
Say,
say,
hey, your grant match is now 108 and a half dollars.
so I guess, but yeah, can part of it be like we funded, but they supply more of the
I think,
staff?
that would be one of the very first solutions I go to, like, hey, listen, we need the firefighters out here for the burgers, which unfortunately, they're mostly volunteers, but they're somebody that's gonna.
That time of
gonna
year,
get on TV.
firefighters are not gonna be available,
Yeah.
a lot of firefighters, and so,
Yeah,
you know,
that's
it's kind of a lot
yeah.
of nonprofits, and volunteer
Because
organizations.
then if we wanna get the
It's a tough
city recorder out there looking burger, right?
They can't get a big, you know, hit boss from Hood River Fire District, so.
It really should be a volunteer thing that we throw money at. But it just should, like, it's brutal, like, where do you fit in going shopping, Carrie Ann? Like, in your day, when do I send you to Portland to load up and then where does it go to keep it cool, and like, who all shows up, and it winds up being a lot of volunteers. But it's always us that's coordinating that head.
One of the biggest things the city got out of that event was getting the community survey. There's a lot of great information. You get a lot more in-depth feedback and critique at those events than you do with an online survey where you only get 23 people applying to it. So, and you're having face-to-face interaction with people, you know, people are meeting their candidates or, you know, politicians, public officials, staff, or, you know, so.
I think what I'm hearing Jeremiah say those close canoe clubs are probably.
I think we'll have the next, people under this, so it's gonna be a busy season.
So February 23rd, I have a problem to solve.
February 23rd.
Sorry, August 23rd. That would be a chilly picnic.
It would be, you think city would be open to giving us $15 worth of
Electricity, right? Just individually filling up bottles of water.
a credit for our electric bills that we pay?
I'll work on, I'm gonna go ahead and tell Janetta that date's off for renting for now. I'll come up with some solutions, run Jordan, see what Jordan thinks, and then I'll bring it back.
Is that something we need to make a motion about tonight?
No, we don't need a motion, I just need consensus. Great.
All right. We have no executive session that has been canceled. So, departmental updates.
So we're gonna kick this meeting into overdrive. I said, I teased it last week, it's gonna happen this week. Parker's gonna deliver an operational update, hit the high notes,
Yeah.
and let's keep on rocking.
Okay, so we'll start at the campground. Campground over the weekends has been 80% full or over. Laurel's been doing an excellent job keeping campers happy. I've been seeing a flux of emails coming in, site changes, different things like that. She's handled all of them swimmingly, and I've been very impressed. Floor buffing has been completed at the visitor center building. If you guys go ahead and peek your head in the windows, anytime you're down there, you'll see Southwest got their furniture set up. We're moving right along in the process of getting stuff a little bit.
What's the date?
We don't know. I talked to Juan today at Extapa, and he's got a problem right now with the county requiring stuff that he doesn't even currently have in his own restaurant, in the Hood River restaurant. So we're going to, based on that conversation that I had and some of the language barriers, I'm gonna make a call tomorrow to the county and see what the holdup is on.
Thank you for that. Everyone wants that place open.
Yeah, you can just.
Welcome Landon to the maintenance team as a seasonal maintenance worker. He's been doing excellent. We got our final payment from SDIS for the Thunder Island pedestrian bridge repair, and we're very close to being completely wrapped up with that project. All in all, milfoil treatment scheduled for the marina. And inspection of a couple of our sites with a Bugami representative, and mowing started on the Frisbee golf course. And then lastly, we're gonna hit the update for the visitor center pump out Jeremiah. Yeah. We'll do an update for the visitor center pump out, where they came to do the new pump installation, tear out. At that time, they came and had the walls completely cleaned and sanitized so they could work inside of the poo-filled tank. And at that time, they discovered the walls being much more compromised than they thought before. We could not in good conscience put those brand new pumps into that casing. And so we're working on getting a quote for a new pump out housing casing, and then continuing on with the pump out project as well.
That is going to get your guys' attention in the coming months. It's an unplanned expense. It's going to tear up that end of the park a little bit. It's probably going to require us to move the tank to a different location. We'll see how that goes with the rest of this year. We'll see what it does to that end of the park. It could be something that kind of spurs a few other decisions you guys will have to make. It's not ridiculously mind-blowing, crazy expensive. The sky is falling, but it's not planned expense for sure. I thought we were done with pumps, so.
Quick question, do you know when the milfoil treatment is happening?
It is happening sometime in July. I don't have an exact date yet. They're super busy, and I think as he gets through stuff faster, he's able to.
Is that only in the marina or also along the beach, right, as well?
We have them treat just the marina. Just the marina, and I think occasionally we've had them treat the pond, the holding pond that we pull our irrigation water out of.
And selfishly, the mowing at the Frisbee golf course, is that just that top part, or is there any trimming of the trail itself?
We just do the top part of the park there. Yeah. If we would like to discuss doing more, we totally could.
Yeah, the disc golf group that put that, it was a muscle training, it used to maintain it at a pretty high level. We've seen that drop off.
But, well, whenever you do mow all of those parts, you'll find a couple of my discs.
Noted.
Where does the milfoil happen and how close to the river is it? Is it?
It's in the marina. It's a plant that grows. It gets caught in people's rudders, and they get frustrated by it, and they yell at us.
So that's that algae looking plant that used to be on all of our shoreline.
Thing I would highly suggest, since we're having the season Caculux plan again this year. That milfoil definitely grows up to about 6 inches from the water surface at the beach, so you might want to consider trimming some of that down.
We tried that one year and it just got washed out.
It just
We'll
was
talk
out right now.
about it, yeah, okay, yeah. I'll explore some options.
That's on Labor Day, by the way. I think they're coming again this year, right?
I'm just curious about like, what is the
Yeah,
treatment
there is
of
some-
environmental friendly, is it?
I'll have to look on this, after that schedule.
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to it. It is done in almost all marinas throughout Oregon. I would imagine that it's getting, there's only 2 guys that can do it. So I would say that it's fairly regulated.
It is extremely regulated.
Okay.
And if it's getting dumped into the Columbia River, it's probably,
It's just bleach, right?
right.
Regulated, they have permits and those entities to be able to do that, and the state of Oregon is very limited on who they give those permits out to.
Okay.
That's my operations update there.
Thank you, fire theory.
Is there any other interest in us doing milk oil treatments out in, or exploring doing milk oil treatments out in the swimming portion of the beach? Or we find it just in the marina, if we want it out there?
It's just paddling out there, doesn't see any, it's really close to the beach at this point,
Okay.
it's further out, but.
It's coming. It's coming. I can see the little babies.
It's something I'll look at. I'll look into it and see what the additional cost would be, and also make sure that the swimming piece of it isn't, right, that there isn't a different chemical that you use in the swimming parts versus what you use in just the boating parts, and I'll let you know the next meeting. Cool. Items?
Yep, I don't have anything beyond your written report, just letting you know that we will be scheduling an all staff and all managers meeting for implementation of the employee handbook in the next 2 weeks.
Same, I don't have anything other outside what's in your written report. I will mention that I attended PNWA. Jeremy Nielsen, from Columbia River Pilots was there. He also presented along with us. It was all in both of the bridge projects. So, Jake Anderson, the Back County Commissioner, and also from the Bi-State Bridge Committee was there and talked about the Hood River White Salmon Bridge. And then Jeremy Nielsen from Columbia River Pilots talked about, and I think this was spawned by the recent bridge collapse, talked about some of the bridges that are in the region that are most susceptible to that sort of collapse. There's actually very few of them. So we can keep our mind ease on a lot of it. But it was still an interesting conversation. Just in general, PNWA is also always a great time to connect with people in the maritime community as well as other ports. Great presentation by Miranda from Port of Newport. She did a presentation on female leadership in ports. And so that was actually great. Talked about the number of female port commissioners that we're seeing increasing, but the number of port leadership has been slowly decreasing. I think at the last meeting, or 3 years ago, they were up to 8 executive directors who were females. They're down to 4 now. So that was interesting. But it's been the better part of my time in PNWA. I will also add to this because Carrie's gonna ask, I will be meeting and then Bach at 8:30 tomorrow morning. We're gonna take a walk through Flex 6 with the folks that are interested in purchasing that building and hopefully have something to bring to you guys on that in the next week or 2. Any questions for your leadership team at all?
Remind me what positive pay setup is again?
Is that under finance?
Yeah,
I'm only gonna sort of know that. You have better insight into positive pay.
It's kind of like setting up ACH accounts. And when, let's say it's Les Schwab, and we bought a set of tires, so we need to pay them, and they're set up. And then the bank gets a list of who's getting what and how much they are, and then they check it when they get it. And so it's supposed to be harder to have errors and fraud. And so also you can set up ones like, for instance, if it's
That's right.
a phone bill and it's always the same amount, but nothing's always the same amount. So it's like putting in payroll and stuff, is more than.
Yeah, and what it really, and what it super helps with is fraud, right? So where you're getting checks that are $1,000 getting charged into $11,000. The bank has some visibility over who that's going to before it comes back. That's sort of the gist of it. I'll reach out to Matt after tomorrow and get nice. And We'll see. And we'll get a good paragraph answer to that. So we'll see what he's doing tonight.
Also, Matt and I are having a meeting with their, commercial banking people Thursday morning at 11 to 12 to see what it looks like and what's involved. So it'll be exciting.
Thank you.
Alrighty. Good, so, okay, Commissioner comments.
I guess I'll start, what a very educational commission meeting tonight. I learned more than I expected, and I'm fascinated with how complex our government is. Hearing Dan talk and everyone else about grants and dependencies and all this other stuff, so I really appreciate everybody's talent they bring here in helping sort through all this and helping us make better decisions, so. I heard that the Festival of Nations is a great event that came back last weekend. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend, but I saw a lot of great photos and it seemed like a lot of happy faces out there, so. And some good luck with the weather too, so. Other than that, it's pretty short. Yeah, I think we can just limit to 1 minute per person here.
As far as my comments concerned, I want to thank Denise Baker's part of Main Street and the comments she said, as well as Mr. Caesar. I did not catch his last name. I attended the Festival of Nations for a good 45 minutes in between raindrops, so I was lucky. That was super interesting and super fun, and I was able to talk with a couple of folks that said that it was very successful for them. So that's great. I do want to say thanks to Moss Adams and I guess Business Oregon as well for the Cascade Locks Strategic Business Plan and pushing that through. Thank you to Dan. Thank you to Mark Newton for that. I have one random question. I know that we had recently covered off campground fee increases. I was curious, this was last time we did that with the marinas, because last time we heard about a year ago. There's a very, very long list, and most of the people out there in the marina aren't from around here, and I don't know how much.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. And to be honest with you, it should have happened around the same time as campground, but it was a lot this year to get into one sort of thing. I would like to try to do it. I would probably like to do it in this next fiscal year before, but I'd like to get it to where every year, we'll get there. Every year we review our fees at the same meeting and make a decision, either we make a decision that it always goes up every year and you guys decide, no, it doesn't come up this year. Right. Or we just say approve and it moves over. So the goal is to get all fees moved into a schedule that gets reviewed at a single meeting.
Right. So just something for you guys to think about as far as the marina is concerned in those fees. For me personally, I would be interested to know what our fees are, how it's comparable. And when was the last time we updated them? And then additionally, how long is our waiting list?
Last time updated, I don't know, waiting list is about 8 months. I did a market study with ones that were in a certain radius of us, like there was only 2 or 3 other marinas, and I'll send it to you tomorrow.
Oh, yeah, that could be for a full discussion.
The whole thing is done. It's like literally ready to bring to you guys. We just did.
Cool. And then I guess the last couple of points, I just want to say thank you very much. I've probably been more than annoying to Jeremiah asking about grants and what grants are available to us for the last year since I've been elected, and probably even before I've been elected. So thank you. That's incredibly helpful. This has been super enlightening. To kind of touch on what you're talking about, I don't think that we'll think about it now, but I have a feeling that years from now, we'll be able to look back and kind of point to tonight as a pivotal turning point for the port and Cascade Locks with the things that we discussed from a grant standpoint, with the things that we've done from a strategic business plan standpoint, from just all of the things we talked about. I know it was a very long night, but I think tonight will be one of those nights where years from now we'll be like, it was that was where it all started. So I want to say thank you all very much, everyone.
I'll say ditto. That was what he said. Yeah, I also learned quite a bit. I mean, I know a little bit about grants, but yeah, there's a lot of them. And yeah, I just am continually amazed by the caliber of discussions that we have about things and in depth, how much we really work out the details on where we're headed as a commission. And you know, I'm looking forward to the executive director's evaluation much more than I did with the last one, because I believe that this one will all be, I think, kind of in the same range, at least as far as, you know, what we believe about where we're headed. And you know, I mean, I believe Jeremiah's pretty much taken the reins as far as, you know, it's kind of like the concept of we've got one employee and you pretty much, you know, have the reins to head the direction you want to go, and you'll be the one to answer for it if it goes all wrong. But, you know, just where we've come in the last year as far as, you know, the caliber of, as I said, the caliber of conversations, the way we're working out things with the strategic business plan and our priorities on the grant funding program. I think, as you said, I think we'll be able to look back on this and go, yeah, that was a pivotal change in where we're headed, and we'll be able to look back and say, wow, yeah, that actually sort of the grant conversations are going to be great as far as what we're doing with all of the things we talked about in our strategic business plan, housing, revitalization of the downtown core, what we're doing strategically as far as where we're headed on the east side development, you know, totally changing where we're headed, and, you know, realizing we can't keep doing the same thing and expecting different results, that, you know, we've got to pick a different driver. And I think we're the crew to do it. So that's all I have to say.
This is a special meeting. He gave you the last word here.
I have to do it before I forgot what Albert said, because I basically stealing everything from the second.
It's all in the notes. Who said it first?
In an effort to keep it short, since it's so late, I will echo what everybody else said, all the thank yous, all the fun had at Festival of Nations. It was great. I got to stop by for about an hour and enjoy some fry bread and huckleberry lemonade.
Yeah, no, fry bread.
That's good.
They have a burger in a little jar.
I hope they get a grant to open a fry bread restaurant. They tell them you need to just open a fry bread restaurant. I've said that for years. So.
Other than that, just looking forward to our first meeting for the Bridge of the Gods Centennial Celebration kickoff on Friday. Hope to get good participation, but we are looking at rescheduling for the morning instead of evening. Nobody wants to have a meeting on Friday night.
And we need to lock in that as soon as possible, because the public meeting, which means we have to post it and all that jazz.
Right. Yeah, if we can just check, I guess, the availability of the location for 10 or 11 a.m. on Friday.
Friday, could be easy, the city's closed.
Well, that's maybe use it for something else, I'll let it carry tomorrow.
Okay.
Or
Also a reminder that the port is closed tomorrow, so I hope you all set up your out of office holiday. You know?
You're welcome. Another reminder, just so you guys, with the adoption of the handbook, you'll see us announcing that we'll be moving to the 410 schedule beginning July 1st. We decided on 7:30 to 5:30, is that right? 7:30 to 5:30. So now people will be able to come in the morning and work and do court work before they go to work, and they'll be able to come in after they get off work. So there's now a window there where people used to struggle to get to us. Now they'll be able to do that. We'll probably open late on Wednesday mornings instead of 7:30, make it 8:30 in order for us to have a staff meeting.
Sounds good.
Excellent. Well, if there's nothing further, we'll adjourn. Thank you for joining us.
Make sure your endurance.
Thanks, everybody.